This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, for which of course I thank you, although I have to warn you that the first hour of the programme at least won't be an easy listen today. And I wonder whether that is part of the answer to the question that I will eventually get around to asking you. And this is heavy stuff as well. I exchanged a few words with Nick on the way out of the studio, and these are the conversations that obviously we are duty bound to have. We have to have. But my goodness me, they are so unpleasant, aren't they? So horrible. They involve things. In fact, I imagine when I tell you that we will be discussing the sentencing of Hugh Edwards, the disgraced former BBC presenter, for the first hour of the programme today, you may well flip over. And I understand that. But I know that you understand that we have to talk about it. And you should really stay. You should really listen, because part of that temptation is part of the problem. Part of that temptation to turn away from the unbearable, from the unthinkable, is perhaps the reason why we only really contemplate it properly, consider it properly when we're presented with the downfall of a famous person. We don't look at I think, probably just shy of 5,000 prosecutions every year related to child abuse images. How often do they even appear in the media when it's not a famous person in the dock? Spoiler alert, they generally don't. And the fact that we don't like talking about it, I'm going to tell you something before 10:15 today that it makes me almost, physically balk at the thought, but I have to tell you because it haunts me, and it speaks directly to the problem that we're trying to address, that we have to try to address today, which is why the criminal justice system on this issue, more perhaps than any other, lags so far behind public sentiment. It's not the job of the criminal justice system to reflect public sentiment. It's pretty hard to pin down precisely what public sentiment is. And neither has Hugh Edwards been afforded any special treatment, or, to use that hideous phrase that some very bad actors are trying to plump up and inflate at the moment, two-tier justice. It's just not true. There was very little chance of him being sent to jail, as I understood it, not least because the person who had sent him the images for which he has been convicted was not sent to jail themselves. So it seemed unlikely that the sender would be punished less stringently than the recipient. But I don't know why we have such a strange attitude, or why our criminal justice system has such a confusing attitude to this subject. And I won't be using the phrase, I won't be using the phrase child pornography. I may accidentally use it because, again, I think that perhaps is part of the problem. So problem number one is we don't like to talk about it. And what grows in the shadows, what grows in the darkness, the really bad stuff flourishes, right, in the darkness. So the less we talk about it, the less light we shine on it, the more, I would never use the word complicit in this context, but the more likely we are to unwittingly, unwantedly, and accidentally contribute to these problems. So the language as well, I won't use the word child pornography because that sounds like the infant equivalent of adult pornography, as if it is somehow a process of consenting human beings doing things for cameras in the hope of arousing or titillating other human beings. It is not that, not least and most obviously because there is no consent. There is no consent at all. And that is where the thing I'm not sure I should remind you of comes in. My memory is so frightened of this that I can't completely remember where it came from. I think it was a journalist who shadowed the police department responsible for tracking this stuff, who wrote about what she, and I'm pretty sure it was a she, had seen as they found themselves trawling through the hard disks and similar of suspects. And there's a phrase that she wrote in a national newspaper that every time, and I don't think about it often, but every single time this topic comes up, and it is for reasons we'll explore together this morning. It is only when somebody famous is convicted of these kind of crimes that we have these conversations. I think that's probably an inevitable upshot of the kind of society that we live in, the nature of celebrity, the nature of news. I don't think that there is much alternative to that. But I sit there, I start reading it, I feel a bit sick. And then I remember this line that was written by a female journalist charged with reporting on the officers, the police. This is going back a few years. I wonder whether they're as well funded or as well resourced as they were then, who are charged with tracking down the victims. They look in the footage for recognisable objects, even a barcode or something, I think, on a box that contained electronic goods, or a tiny glimpse of a view in the reflection of a computer screen or a window or a television, and the forensic work that goes into this kind of thing is something that I think, under my glorious rule, we'd be directing a hell of a lot more manpower and resources towards. But I'm going to say the sentence, right, that speaks to the very heart of why I don't get the attitude that this country has to this crime. I don't understand why Hugh Edwards and the person that sent him the images have not been sent to jail, because their appetites fuel that abuse that people undertake in the knowledge that it will provide some form of hit or pleasure to people who view it. And the phrase involved a little girl being, this is a massive trigger alert, by the way, if this kind of thing has happened to you, I need to warn you right now. It's a very banal sentence, but it's possibly the most heartbreaking string of words I've ever heard in my life. And you can hear the little girl on the film that this journalist wrote about saying, "Do all little girls do this with their daddy?" And he films this stuff, and there's a market for it. And my understanding is it's not necessarily monetized. Sometimes it will just be swapping images of your abuse for somebody else's. And that is what child sex abuse images are. That is what that hideous phrase that I'm only going to use once more to highlight its hideousness. That is what child pornography supposedly is. And I don't get it. I'm sorry. I wish I didn't say that as often as I do sometimes. I've got another topic later today where I'm going to admit to you that I'm a little bit confused about how to handle it. And it's a lot more lighthearted than this one, I can tell you. But I don't really get it. I can tell you that, and the figures that we found date back to 2020. I couldn't get my hands on anything more recent, but I imagine it's a fairly constant graph. Well, maybe not actually, with COVID and the impact upon the criminal justice system and the mess in our courts and the prioritisation that officers and prosecutors have to undertake. But there were 4,762 prosecutions relating to child abuse images across England and Wales in 2020, and of those, 2,385 ended in a conviction, which is about half. It's just over half. That's a conviction. 8 out of 10 people caught with images of children being sexually abused do not go to jail. That is a statistic, a revelation from the head of the National Crime Agency, which itself, we read recently, is hemorrhaging staff and supremely under-resourced. So this is 4 years ago. 8 out of 10 people in the UK caught with images of children being sexually abused avoid going to jail. So we can say two things immediately. Yeah, I know. I'm reading some of your messages in response to that line, and I wondered if I'd get it out. I don't know that. I think I've said it to you once before. I just think that if anybody's thinking, I don't know if I can do this, or I don't know why we have to talk about this, I just think that reminds you why. I think that reminds you why, that single line, why this idea that the images are somehow detached from the abuse, the idea that there's several degrees of separation from the abuse and the trade in images. I reject that violently. I reject that with every fibre of my being. You watch this stuff, you create the market. You feed that appetite, you create the market that these criminals, these subhumans feed. So I want to just say why. I don't know. I never know at 13 minutes past 10 in the morning who's listening or who's qualified or who can comment. I imagine that if you have endured the nightmare of going through cases like this, having been adjacent to them, obviously, if you have been convicted of these kind of crimes and you think that you can help the rest of us answer the questions we're about to ask, I do want to talk to you. But who can answer it? Who can actually answer the question of why? Why is a crime that makes us want to cry and howl and hang Hugh Edwards by his bootstraps from the nearest lamppost, metaphorically speaking? Why is this crime in this country so leniently punished? And it always is. So let's park immediately any attempts to claim that there has been special treatment here or that there is any form of preferential justice or to use that dreadful phrase, two-tier justice. Just not true. It's a conversation about a national characteristic. It's a conversation about a facet of our criminal justice system. And I am not embarrassed to tell you that I have no clue why. Is it because if they jailed these people, then we would run out of jail space even quicker than we are already as a consequence of 14 years of austerity and Conservative Party policies that were designed to appease the vampiric chompings of Daily Mail editors rather than actual national interests? I don't know. Oddly, the numbers are almost symmetrical. If the 2,500 or so convictions were all translated into prison sentences, then the prison population would crash through the 100,000 barrier, which is sort of critical mass. We're nibbling around the edges of it at the moment, but there is absolutely no way they could accommodate another 2,500 prisoners tomorrow in the prison system. But why don't we send these people to jail? 0345 6060 973. If I have to come up with another question because I don't have enough people listening to this program with enough insights or experiences to answer that question, then I'll do that. But why don't we send these people to jail? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I don't say this to you very often either, but don't forget that this microphone in front of me works both ways. And some mornings I need you to do me a service in the way that you're sometimes kind enough to explain that I do you. I listen. Sometimes I need you to hold my hand when we have certain types of conversation. I can't do this one on my own. Why don't we send people like Hugh Edwards, whatever the mitigation and whatever the defence, and people like the young man that sent him these images, why don't we send them to jail? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
18 minutes after 10 is the time. It is on every front page and widely covered inside. Career and legacy ruined. There can be no way back. Accounts of the messages that Hugh Edwards shared with a paedophile called Alex Williams, who was sending him videos and still photographs that he described in titillating detail, in trying to sort of excite a response from his correspondent. A bizarre story I'd missed at the time about Edwards putting on his LinkedIn profile last week offers to work for free for charities, and and it came down pretty shortly afterwards as an indication perhaps that even he didn't appreciate, as he prepared to go to court for sentencing, the full public revulsion at what he's been convicted of doing, and he turned up with a suitcase at Westminster Magistrates yesterday, which means that he was at least open to the possibility of being sent to jail. And I don't know anyone who, straight up, with no involvement or experience of this world at all, who can comfortably answer the question of why these people are not sent to jail. So we're going to try. Kathy's in Harrogate. Kathy, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm quite nervous.
Well, you take all the time you want, and if there's anything I can do to help, just tell me. All right.
Thank you. That's very kind. I look back on my past. My stepfather was arrested he had about eight years worth of child pornography hidden all over our house.
Good Lord.
And I still don't understand to this day why we, as the children in the house, weren't ever interviewed, where nothing was ever talked about. He slightly different to what you said before. He was in our local paper. He was all over our local paper.
Local.
And yes, our local. We lived in West London, and he had a very good job. And I think somebody just got lucky. Really, a journalist in the court the day he was in, and it was a double page spread in our local paper, and nobody ever asked us at our school how we were. The only comment we ever had was from our art teacher, who said that we might prefer to eat our lunch inside, so that
without even alluding to why.
No mention. They couldn't go there. They just couldn't discuss it. And even years and years on, my mum died many years ago, but he stayed in our home, and
she didn't chuck him out.
Nope.
Okay,
nope, he stayed.
I'm sorry, Kathy.
And as I got older, and I have 3 children, and a brilliant husband, and my life's okay, but it's damaging. It's massively damaging in relationships, in every part of your life.
How did you conduct normal domestic life after? Well, I presume he wasn't sent to jail.
No, he had a conditional discharge, and he was. I think he had to see a counsellor for 12 weeks.
And you still lived in that home?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How did? I can't imagine anything, to be fair, about what your later teenage years were like, from breakfast through to Christmas, and knowing. What was it? Forgive me for such a crass question, but what was it like?
It was very solitary.
Yeah.
We threw ourselves into friendships. We were anywhere that we could be but our home.
Right. Did you ever talk to your mum about it, Kathy?
Once when she twice.
Right.
When she really made life quite difficult for my sister, who had a harder time from him than I did.
In terms of discipline, not in terms of sexual abuse.
In terms of sexual abuse.
Oh my God.
And I challenged her over. I was definitely the fighter of our house. I would look after her, and I would. But she just, it's crazy. There will be so many people. I know there will be so many people in my position who will have grown up in these massively dysfunctional, abusive homes, who won't have ever felt that they had the right to challenge, who.
Yeah, of course, and
we'll try and normalise.
And it's profoundly unhelpful for the rest of us, to articulate our shock in a way that makes it sound as if we think you could have done something differently because you're children, and of course you can't. But now I understand why you mentioned at the very beginning of this call the failure of anybody to talk to you, because that should have been a red flag or an alarm bell for actual abuse. The possession of the images of other children being abused should have made them come in like Columbo in pursuit of the possibility that he was an abuser himself, and they failed completely to do that.
But actually, what you say there about it's actually quite nice to hear shock. I know it sounds a bit silly, but actually we should be shocked. Everyone should be shocked. I know that my response to it, and I listened to some of the callers earlier on the Nick Farley show, because the whole Hugh Edwards story I found really painful, really painful to listen to. And so I found that I'm trying to almost listen to it and understand other people's take on it. But quite a few of the people have tried to find good in him. They're trying to find points that they can... And I really understand that. I really understand that feeling of trying to think, how? If I can understand the person, then I feel like I don't know. Maybe it makes it. Maybe
you
it
want things to make sense.
Control.
It's a human impulse to make sense of things. The unknowable is terrifying, and I imagine that somebody with the objectivity that a proper psychiatrist or psychologist would need would spend a lot of time looking at his apparently outwardly very respectable, but inwardly and at home very abusive father. But in the moment of the crimes that your stepfather committed, the ones for which he was convicted and the ones for which he wasn't, that doesn't really matter, does it? Because the job of the criminal justice system is to provide justice, and you got none. Can you answer that question? Why do these people not get sent to jail? Do you know? Did anyone ever? Did you?
I think something you said earlier, actually, horrifically, I think you're right. I don't think there is space for them. I think it is so rife. I think it is such a prolific crime that I just don't believe they have space. And I think that actually one of the things that these people are most scared of is the reason why my stepfather and my mum actually left the country was because, I don't know if you remember, but there was a News of the World campaign to out people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it the people who'd used their credit cards to access imagery online? I can't remember, but it doesn't matter.
But he was showing pictures of them, and he was so scared that he would be publicly outed that he left the country, he wasn't. So.
Don't apologise to me. I'm spluttering in a. Well, I'm glad you like shock, or I'm glad that shock is helpful to you, because there's lots of shock here, and that is where my next question comes from, which is did you ever feel sorry for your mum? And I think you understand why I've asked the question that way round. She was a very, very confusing character. She had an incredibly successful job in the city. She had an amazing obituary written about her in the Times when she died. Gosh.
People think she was brilliant. I get lots of people who say your mum was outstanding, a real trailblazer, and she was. I can have respect for her, but I can also think she failed terribly as a mother. And I found the only way that I can reconcile it in my head is to think that you can love somebody, you can miss somebody, you can think they were terrible, you can hate them, and all those things are okay. That you don't have to. They're all okay if they exist in your head. They're okay. If that makes any sense. And that's the only way that I can cope with it, is to think I am a better mother.
Yeah.
I would never, ever, ever. I've been very careful with my children from a very young age. I'm very open with them. And that's the only way that I can sort of sort out my relationship in my head with my mum, is to be a good mum.
Yes, and break the cycle, as it were.
Absolutely.
And that is, a difficult but crucial part of this entire process. Kathy, thank you. I don't want to say goodbye to you if you're going to put the phone down and think, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd told him that. Is there anything else that... The other thing, actually, one of the things that there are all these tiny little sentences or things that really get you, and it's the photo. Somebody said something about how the photos still exist, they're sort of somewhere in the ether, and I find that really difficult now, even as a 48-year-old. I find that very difficult to know that somewhere, I'm sure there are photos of me and my sister, I'm sure there are, and that I find very difficult to know, which, again, it's a control thing. It's that even if you can physically or mentally move your mind on, not that anyone's ever looking at something from, when I was a 7-year-old, but it's still that. And I think I've heard other people talk about that, and I think there are a few little factors that a lot of people will find difficult, however much they put this behind them. So I suppose it's a constant echo. It's a constant visual echo, isn't it? In a way, whether anyone hears it or sees it or not doesn't matter. It's there. The echo is resonating around the world.
It's a bit of control elsewhere, and it's foul, and it's a disgusting world that you don't want to be a part of. And that's difficult. But no. I'm amazed I've managed to speak so much. Sorry.
Well, you haven't just spoken a lot. It's not just quantity, Kathy. It's for those of us trying to not just empathise but also understand, which is sometimes harder than empathising. That's been an extraordinarily helpful contribution. I know it wouldn't have been easy for you to make, although I sense perhaps a bit of catharsis for you, a bit of...
No, actually, yes, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, it has been.
Wow, thank you. All right, well, promise me you'll ring me again on a different subject one day.
Yeah, thank you, I'll try.
Kathy,
my first,
take
care.
My
last.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just thank you. I don't know why I said put the phone down as well. I'm talking into a microphone, but I don't think that was necessarily the most important element of that exchange. What a woman. What an amazing woman. And I'm prepared to wager a small amount or a large amount. What an amazing mum as well. It's 10:30. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:33. A lot of love coming in for Kathy, as you would expect, and also a lot of admiration and also a lot of stories, which I'm not going to have time to cover fully. And I want to apologise to you for that and assure you that I will read as many of them as I humanly can, because I know that sending some of them will be very difficult for you. And maybe that is part of the answer to the question of you know, if we truly pursued these kind of crimes with the alacrity that most of us think should be absolutely normal, then we'd need to build 100 new prisons, and we're only really talking about the images. I'll read this, which is it's signed from Andrew in Derbyshire. A lot of people asking me not to share their names, but this is an example of the sort of story that you're sharing with me, that I'm not going to be able to air all of them. Good morning, James. Listening to your first caller, I was abused as a little boy by my mother. Obviously, everyone else was blissfully unaware. When I did find the strength to speak out just after my son was born, no one believed me, just as my mother had told me at the time of the abuse. It's difficult. I never got justice. I want to tell my father later in life, but he got dementia and he would never have understood. But I think he knew, because he once said to me, I don't know what happened to you, but I never did anything wrong to you, did I? And I don't know how many stories are kind of being roused from your past this morning by the failure, in the eyes of many of us, of the criminal justice system to send Hugh Edwards to jail. Although I stress again, because it's important, facts are important, never more so than when you're navigating incredibly high levels of emotion, that his sentencing is normal for this offence, and I don't understand why. Andy's in Camberwell. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'll keep it brief.
Okay. You don't have to. It's up to
you. Well, my earliest memories are of CSA from two different people, and to be honest, I don't really want to go too much into it. The point I'm trying to make here is there's a bit of a consistent theme. It's going to sound a bit off the beaten path, but how on earth does somebody interested in all that sordid world and somebody actually committing offences there, how do they get 6 months suspended sentence when graffiti writers are getting 2 and 3 years in prison? It makes no sense. It happens over and over and over again. And I know that seems like a really sort of a bit of an underground subculture niche thing to do, but it's just to highlight the absolute
we pick the examples that are closest to our lives, and I think for a lot of people it would be the Just Stop Oil protesters, or it might be people that haven't paid their TV licence. So we'll all be able to find an example of a custodial sentence for a crime that strikes us as trivial in comparison to the sending of child sex abuse images. I don't get it. You don't get it. I mean, do you have any theories? Do you have any?
I mean, tenuous links. You can call me a little bit tinfoil hat, but it's kind of. I personally find it interesting to see how huge corporations have constantly got linked with this sort of activity going on, and yet, for an example, they all want to use graffiti sort of underground subculture stuff. It's clearly the money thing, is like everybody else saying, but it just boggles me. There's so much movement in this country for people to get outraged about pointless things that don't matter, and yet people do not seem to have the appetite to get outraged about looking after our kids. Man, it's actually horrible. This is coming from somebody who's lived through this. Yes. And obviously so many of your other callers have as well, but it's just it just actually boggles me senseless. It's how are you supposed to make sense of living in a world like this? it just doesn't. It doesn't make sense.
And you can't. And the only possible answer that fits the fact is that it is a lot more widespread than most of us realise, and of course reaches into parts of our society that is involved in lawmaking. And I mean, look, if the church can be riddled with paedophiles, then it's not going to be the biggest shock in the world to discover that other institutions are either.
It's funny you say that, because my two were from the church.
I'm sorry.
There
it is. I didn't know.
Strange old world.
No, I didn't know that. Have you had help? Have you had any?
Me and my sister went through a very similar thing, and my mum was very ill growing up, which is why it kind of was able to happen.
Yeah, vulnerability.
But the appetite to acknowledge anything's happened is through the floor as well. So it's basically me and my sister just have gone through this thing. We didn't even know each other had gone through it. Like, my sister's nearly 40, I'm 30-something now. Yeah. And we only started talking about this last year.
And that helped, I presume?
Well, yeah, it did. But it's when you're then sitting there as siblings trying to talk to your parents about it, you still don't really want anything to do with it. It's all just wild, man.
I feel for you. You know I do. And you speak for a lot of people, particularly with, I mean, it doesn't have to be the church, but any position of authority where parents are desperate to pretend it's not happening for reasons of self-preservation. You must have imagined it, or it can't have been that, or he's just being friendly. And this happens all the time in this field, and less so now, partly because we do at least talk about it more than we used to do. But as Andy has reminded all of us, nowhere near as much as we should. So the sharing of images, this specific offence committed by Hugh Edwards, and the absolute absence of shock or surprise among experts, among people who know the criminal justice system in general, or this field of offending in particular, that he hasn't been sent to jail. So, we try on this programme at least not to do lazy phone-ins, not to do the really, really obvious two-dimensional binary question. And that's why we're not doing it today, because we could just sit here getting outraged. But to understand why something that seems so wrong to so many is so normal, well, that's a much more difficult question for you to answer. It's easy for me to ask. I do appreciate that this morning, more than ever. Martin's in Hertford. Martin, what would you like to say?
Well, I was just speaking to your researcher just now. I rang in really because until about 2 years ago, I was what they call a Mosovo officer, which is the person working for the police charged with the management of offenders within the community, people like Hugh Edwards, people who are on the sex offenders register. I haven't actually heard too much of the conversation that was coming into it. I've just literally been to the gym, and so I thought I'd just ring in and see if you could pick my brain.
Yes.
So rather than have a specific comment. Sadly, I don't. But
so
but I've got some knowledge of it, and I'm still working sort of post-time in the police within that field as well, working for regulators as well, looking in safeguarding and things like that. But ultimately, I'm not surprised, like your other experts have said.
There's nothing extra. We haven't had any other expert, except through the expertise of experience, Martin, from the other side of the fence, from the one that you're on. But why? Why, in layman's terms, is this not an immediately or a much more frequently imprisonable offence?
Well, I would say there's inconsistency across the country. I mean, I look at the sex offenders and managed on advisor system. That's where the sex offenders register is. And when you look at it, you'll have people who are already in prison shown on that. You'll have people who are in the community. That was my world. People who come out of prison, or people who never even went to prison.
Yes.
There's more who don't go to prison than those who do for image offences.
Yes. So we're looking at 8 out of 10. People caught with images of children being sexually abused avoid going to jail. That was from the head of the National Crime Agency a few years ago.
Yeah, so, you've got three categories primarily of people. You have your category A, which will be your most extreme, the stuff you and I would not want to think about.
Right.
You've got your category B, which is a sort of an intermediate level. And then you've got your category C, which would be best described as children posing in a slightly sexualized sort of way that would give someone of that sort of inclination a bit of a turn on. That there'd be no reason to be accessing that sort of stuff. They wouldn't necessarily be naked, but a lot of the times they would. But that would be the lowest category. Now, you get a lot of people who are accessing that type of thing, and it's because it's deemed to be on the lower end of the spectrum. And there are processes like the sort of thing that I used to do that manages people effectively within the community without having to put them into prison. I mean, just to give you a sort of flavour.
Talk to me if you could slow down a tiny bit, because remember this is something you know an awful lot about, and none of the rest of us know anything. No, don't apologise. I'm sorry for being such a school teacher. So I don't know. You probably know. In Edwards' case, there were 7 in category A, and I think you're telling us that if that number out of a total of 377, and if all 377 had been category A, then the sentence may well have been slightly different. But I'm interested, and I want to ask this question from a position of curiosity rather than criticism. So forgive me if it sounds like I'm closer to the second thing than the first. I'm not. You do your job. And goodness knows the mess we'd be in if people like you didn't do the very difficult work that you do. But you speak then, when you talk about avoiding going to prison, you speak as if that is a goal, as if not sending people to prison in this context is part of the aim, as if that is a last resort. Whereas for an awful lot of people, there are some crimes, this would very much be one of them, where we feel the opposite. So why is it a goal of the criminal justice system to minimise jail time for offenders like this?
I would say there's a knowledge within the justice system that actually the people who are ever caught and convicted for this, it's the thin end of the wedge anyway.
Yes.
And you could just have a tidal wave, a tsunami, and just overrun the prison system.
I was really hoping you weren't going to say that.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's the way people are caught quite often. It's by sheer luck anyway. It involves the National Crime Agency involved with the US, getting information and then sort of geolocating it, looking at an IP address, finding it, going there. And the process of investigation and everything around it is really long and quite protracted, too long and protracted, to be brutally honest with you.
Sure.
And it takes ages. If someone ever invented a scanner where you could just go to someone's and randomly just say that person's done it, but you did listen, the world would be shocked. It'd be a crazy place. But can I just say one thing? In the community, when people don't go to prison,
yes,
I don't think that there is a more stigmatised, awful crime type to be convicted of. Now, I'm not feeling sorry for these people in any particular way. But if you get put, quote, on the sex offenders register, irrespective of whether it's a child sex offence or an adult sex offence, people will, I think, hold it in their mind that you are a paedophile.
Yeah.
Just by the fact that you wear that tag. And there are people on it, really, brutally honest, who should never have been on the sex offenders register anyway, in my view. We've given the stigma that goes with it.
Okay.
But being on it carries a whole range of restrictions. The people have to notify to police station once a year where they live. They have to notify every time they change a bank card. They have to notify if they're going to go abroad. They have to notify so many different things. They have to notify changes of addresses. They have to notify if they're going to stay for 3 days or more at an address with someone under 18. They have to and they can't do it over the phone. They have to go into a police station, stand in a line saying, I'm a sex offender, blah, 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 this is what's happening. That's what they have to do. That's the basic notification requirement. On top of that, and it's not...
That's very helpful, because there's a danger, isn't there, of hearing the news bulletins on stories like this and thinking that their name has been written on a list and that's the end of it.
No. There are responsibilities. And, of course, one of the things that is noted, if people breach, they go to court. Now, that means if you have to notify within a very short period of time if you get a new bank card. You go to the police station, got a new bank card, my old one was lost, this is my new one, you notify. If you did that a day late, it's a breach.
Right.
You get a warning. Or, potentially, if you've done it 2 or 3 times, you're at court. You go to court for breaching the notification order, and that happens all the time. People are on a repetitive cycle through forgetfulness or just non-compliance where they'll find themselves in court. Now, that's the basic level. On top of that, and I don't know if it's happened with Hugh, but I would be amazed if it's not. He probably would have been issued what they call a sexual harm prevention order, was he? I don't know.
Off the top of my head, I don't know either. Sorry.
So a sexual harm prevention order is even more brutal. That is an order which creates bespoke conditions as the court sees fit, which in most cases in indecent images, which will say the person is not allowed to have a mobile phone or an internet-enabled device unless they register it with the police, and they allow the police to inspect it. They allow the police to manually check it every time they go around, whenever they see fit, and also maybe even have management software put on that device so it can be remotely monitored what you're actually looking at any one time. And there's loads of other conditions.
So you're telling us that actually it is quite a comprehensive punishment. It is quite a comprehensive sentence, and I sense a degree of impatience on your part with the sort of almost the kind of prioritization of prison and the belief that that's the only punishment that really counts, matters, or works.
Well, I understand that, punishment can be seen as a, part of the road to rehabilitation on one hand, but equally it's seen as a punitive on the other side.
So for whose benefit would a prison sentence be, in other words?
It might not be a benefit, but equally society and people might think, well, actually, we need to, I'm sorry, you've done this, it's awful.
But this is the worst of all possible worlds, isn't it? Because as you say to us, there's so much of it out there that they can't really do a custodial sentence because that would be the thin end of the wedge. But it is somewhat reassuring to know that the words that we hear in news bulletins or that we read in newspapers that get bandied around actually have a lot more depth. There's a lot more going on than merely. You see, they must sign the sex offenders register. A lot of people will think that just involves sticking your name on a list and then. But no, thank you for that.
Well, it means unannounced visits. Not at 4 a.m, obviously, but visits at a time probably when it's inconvenient, where people like myself will knock on the offender's door, and conversation will be had how they're getting on, and it will involve the troweling up of the ground of everything they did. It'll involve a deep discussion of masturbation habits and what you're looking at, what your thought processes are, in a very intrusive way, discussing the very things that people don't want to discuss, they don't want to think about, they want to minimise, they want to forget. It's sort of every few weeks, a knock at the door, tell me how you're getting on, what you're doing, where you're working, what you're doing.
Okay.
Well, I've got a new job at this place here. Okay, right. Involve children? Yes, it does. Well, okay, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to disclose to them that you've got this conviction because it's a child sex offence they need to know. By the way, I'll be ringing them tomorrow to find out whether you have or haven't. So, boom, it's intense. It's an intense process in the community. No two ways about it.
Good Lord, I can't. That's a job and a half. How do you retain? Final question. How do you retain your faith in human nature, if indeed you do?
Well, bizarrely, I've dealt with. I mean, this type of offending cuts across all strata of society.
For sure, absolutely.
All ethnic boundaries, all religious boundaries. There are people in all types of communities who get involved in child sex offending to various degrees. There are some people who are out and out hardened paedophiles who, that's their life and that's what they're going to do. They're unrepentant and they just take this as consequential to that lifestyle that they have chosen to lead. There are some people, more often, if I categorise the lonely, middle-aged, midlife crisis type chap who, late at night starts drifting on the computer, and it's a slippery slope through the pornography cycle down into before you end up in the gutter of indecent images, and they end up there. And the criminal justice system and the process that I've described as a huge wake-up call. And they're horrified with their own behaviours and are shocked into probably never offending again. There are lots of people like that, in my view. Incidentally, there's one little. I mean,
briefly,
you've got
very late for the break.
Tiny little stat check. Yeah. People who access indecent images of children, statistically, there's a low level of that drifting into actual contact offending of children.
Okay, that's helpful. So, thank you.
But it's people actually of the contact offenders. Vast majority of them are involved in indecent images of children as well.
Oh, so the traffic goes largely in one direction, not in the other?
Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. And goodness me, I can't help thinking of what Michael Gove said about the country. I haven't had enough of experts. Never on this program. Never on this program, Martin. I'm grateful to you
it's
for
an
that.
Interesting one.
Well, you can say that again, and the work you do must take something of a toll, although you seem remarkably upbeat and articulate, actually, for our benefit, despite that. Thank you. And my apologies to, I don't know who I'm apologising to, but I'm very, very late for this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:54, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, extraordinary amount of messages coming in, and many of them, as you'd imagine in this hour, extraordinarily powerful and upsetting. I'll read this one from from someone who says, please don't use my name. That was close. I'm a psychiatrist and have worked in prisons, including in specific sexual offender units. Even I, a tough, grizzled old professional who has seen, heard, and had to come to terms with the worst of things, was brought to tears by that phrase you used in your introduction. It's so easy to forget that there is a defenceless, precious child at the root of all of these things, whose world has been torn apart and whom has no one to trust. You should keep reminding people of that phrase. I don't know if I can. I genuinely don't know if I can. I said it today. I think it's only the second time I've ever said it, but my goodness me, if it can affect someone like Phil with the jobs that he's done, then it's hardly surprising that it affects the rest of us. And actually, my friend Nikki Campbell makes a point rather brilliantly on social media this morning, and Nikki has recently been successful in the pursuit of a paedophile from his school, and an incredible story. And he makes a point very powerfully about the children involved in these images being the most important element of all of the stories. I'll try and find that for you and share it shortly. But Margaret is in Catterick. Margaret, what made you pick up the phone?
I come from this, or to this, from two different aspects.
Oh, yes.
First of all, I was a teacher, and I spent a lot of my teaching time in inner city areas of great social neglect, and I have dealt with children who were abused and who were filmed during that abuse. So that's one thing. But the thing that I suspect is more useful for the phone-in is that I found images of child sexual abuse on my ex-husband's, and now ex-husband's, computer.
Oh, my days. Can I take you to that moment, Margaret?
Yes, of course, of course. This was 12 years ago. I've had galloping loads of therapy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to phone in.
No. What? I mean, I presume at first you think it's some terrible mistake and you can't believe what you're seeing. And both of those things.
To be honest, the first thing when I saw what I saw, which happened by mistake,
yes,
was I didn't know what it was. And do you remember after 9/11, people thought they saw cows falling from the sky because
yes,
they couldn't accept that it was people.
Yes.
Obviously, I didn't see cows, but I could not, for the life of me, understand what was happening. And then suddenly I did. And I was so shocked.
I'm sure.
And there were two things. Obviously, I stopped it. And what the hell am I looking at?
Yes.
Then I thought, are there any more? Because if there were more, this wasn't a mistake.
Right.
And remember that I had been a teacher and I knew all sorts of protocols and what needed to be done when one dealt with this, with children. So I had another look, and it wasn't a mistake, and there was more. And that was when I started shaking. And then I sort of thought, well, I'd better move away from the computer before I throw up on the nice new carpet. And so I managed to get downstairs. I couldn't walk. By the way, he was out of the house at this time. He was not around. And so I went down the stairs like a child, bumping down on your bum, which isn't terribly dignified for a grown woman.
Because you couldn't.
I could not stand.
Control your limbs. You're in a state.
I could not stand. I was crawling.
Shock. Yes. Oh, you.
Then how much more do you want to know?
Well, as much as you're comfortable sharing, I think we can pause the news for this, Margaret. And I want you to be comfortable, and I want to be confident that you're happy sharing this, because it cuts to the very heart of what we're talking about today, doesn't it?
Everybody who needs to know about this knows about it.
Yes.
It became public knowledge. It went to Crown Court.
Yes.
So I'm okay.
So did you go to the police directly? I mean, you confronted him first, did you?
Or? No. He was away, and he was away overnight.
Right.
And I was meant to be printing out a menu for a dinner party we were due to be having the next day. That's
why you were on the computer?
Yes, because I couldn't store it on my little laptop thingy because it wasn't that fabulous. So anyway, yes, once I was able to hold the telephone, because because I couldn't pick anything up, I thought, well, the most sensible thing to do is to make a cup of tea, because even in the back of my head, I was thinking, much as I would like a very large whiskey, I suspect that I'm going to need to leave the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a cup of tea, and then I picked up the phone and I called the local police, and they said, oh, we're terribly sorry. There's a domestic going on nearby, and we haven't got any female officers. Will you be all right with a male officer, or do you want to wait?
Right.
And they were lovely.
Yes.
And I said, no, I'll be fine. And this dear, burly policeman turned up at the house, apologised again for being a man.
Yeah.
And said, are you sure? And I said, yes, it's fine. By then I kind of,
yeah. I don't want to use the phrase "least of your worries," but it didn't.
Absolutely, it didn't. But it was terribly sweet of him to ask,
wasn't it? Yes. Because there's a lot going on here, Margaret. There really is. So you showed him presumably what you'd found.
Yes. First of all, he said, you're absolutely sure, there's a lot that's legal. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure this is illegal. And so he went up and he had a look. And I was with him. And he said, right. And he looked at his watch. And I said, what are you looking at your watch for?
Yeah.
And he said, I've got to call this in. And I suddenly realised that this was real.
Your world was about to fall to pieces.
And again, I'm going back to film, I'm sorry.
Don't do whatever you want and stop apologising to me.
In horror movies where they do this amazing thing with lenses so that everything suddenly elongates and the world looks like a little black dot, that is exactly what happened. My whole world suddenly went shooting over the horizon. And I realised that I collapsed. I mean, I was on my knees. I didn't collapse. I didn't faint.
Right.
But I couldn't stand anymore, and I cried a lot.
Yeah.
And terribly snotty crying, really snotty.
I'm sure.
And I just said, so this is it. And he said, yes. And do you have his mobile number? Because we're going to need to call him. And so I said, well, I've got to go downstairs to get that.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs to find his mobile number, and I could hear him upstairs calling it in.
Wow.
And so they took the hard drive, obviously.
Yeah.
And he came back downstairs with the hard drive under his arm. And he just said, do you have anywhere you can go? And I said, no one will believe me. Because he was a pillar of the community. And he said, I don't think you should be here. He'll be coming back tomorrow. And so that was that.
That was
hello.
That. No, I'm
sorry. You were very quiet. Sorry.
Well, I usually get told off for interrupting people, Margaret, but today's not one. Today's not one of those days. So
I'm terribly sorry. I thought the phone had gone.
And then the wheels of the criminal justice system started turning.
Well, it was terribly slow.
Yes, I'm sure.
I moved out and.
That moment, you moved out that day. You did go and stay somewhere else.
He said, the lovely policeman said, I'll phone you at about 11:30.
Make sure you're
quarter
okay.
to 12.
Yeah.
Make sure you're okay. And meanwhile, I phoned a friend who lived as far away as possible from where I was living.
Yeah.
And just said, can I come and stay? Because he will never think of looking for me here.
Right.
And she said, yes, absolutely. And so I packed the car, and when you read, I'm sorry, I keep referring to film and literature and drama and things.
I understand why. They're mental milestones, Margaret. They're points of reference that help us process things.
I packed the car with 2 suitcases, my jewellery box, and 1 or 2 things that were of vague value that I thought I might be able to sell if I needed money. And I had £100 in cash. And I left. And I went to my friend, and it was a long drive. And I stayed overnight somewhere and then carried on.
And got there the next day and began the next part of your life with this extraordinary shadow over. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest he didn't get sent to jail.
No.
Did you expect him to be?
Yeah, oh gosh, it was really difficult. I was told the police were absolutely brilliant.
Good.
Marvellous. And my liaison officer rang me and said, because at one stage he said that I'd done it because I wanted to divorce him.
Okay.
And I wanted to get more money.
A sort of desperate defence tactic.
Oh, it was hysterical, especially as I was out of the country some of the times he'd been doing it. So they,
of course.
But, when it eventually got to court, which was 2 years later, because they had 80 cases and only one person in that area.
That answers some of the
them.
questions we've been wrestling with this morning, doesn't it?
And he should have got 3 years, and it was suspended, and I can't remember the proper word for it when they squash everything. They run concurrently, and it was suspended. He went at that stage. They had two different types of sexual offenders orders. So he went on the sexual offenders register. He had to go through the same, as you were hearing from other people, dear chap who'd been doing all the hard work. Yes. He had to go on one of those courses. I heard later that he hated it because he didn't believe that he should have been there. They weren't like him. And he was also on a prevention order, which meant that he wasn't to live anywhere near children, all sorts of things.
And
I found out because later, when I'd moved, obviously, because there was no way I was staying around here at that stage, because loads of people took his side.
Really?
Until
the evidence came out in court, right?
Until the evidence came out.
That happened with one of the teachers at my prep school, actually, and he was also a pillar of the community, and everyone was. People even turned up to support him in court, and then slowly slipped away as the evidence was read out. Margaret. Yeah,
and so yes,
that's it.
Yeah, basically, I met somebody when I was living miles away who worked at Whitehall in the legal department, and she did some circling about when the sentencing actually happened. And she said that the prisons were full. At the same time, somebody in Wales who was 20 years younger than he was, and was therefore considered more actively capable, in inverted commas, was sentenced and got the sentence that he should have got.
Right.
But because he was 20 years older, he was considered less of a danger.
These are the calculations and the algorithms that we never know about until we find ourselves in situations like the one you found yourself in, which no one would wish on their worst enemy. How are you? How are you now, having spoken to me, and how are you generally?
Generally, I'm doing really well. Thank you very much.
News. Thank you very much.
I've been very lucky.
Yes.
Although
you deserve a bit of luck, I think, after what you went through, don't you?
Although I will probably never, ever be in a relationship again. It's just, how do you... that's just far too big.
Trust, isn't it? Your trust is destroyed.
It's just so much. So much baggage. I have... the first day of the Hugh Edwards thing... A couple of my friends got in touch and said, "Are you all right?"
Okay.
Which I thought was incredibly kind.
Yes. Well, you deserve it. You deserve kindness.
And again, I've been kind of holding back and holding everything in until the sentencing. And then yesterday's sentencing, and I thought, I knew that would happen. Knew it.
Gosh, triggering that for you.
A little bit, and those same friends were very kind.
That's nice.
But for anyone who is going through this now... Oh, yes, and one other thing, sorry. The reason I mentioned the fact that I used to teach, when I was teaching one school, on my second day there, a kid disclosed.
Right.
And it turns out that his whole family were part of a massive ring.
Oh, my days.
And I was absolutely terrified when I saw this stuff on my ex's computer.
Right.
That I was going to see something with him in it. That would have killed me. Luckily, I didn't. But it would have, if I had seen that child and that child's family with it, I would have been even more of a mess.
Oh. You were about to say for anybody going through something similar, I think. Before
yes,
you
thank you very much for reminding me. You will get through it. It is appallingly dark. It is the hugest hole. And I did not get the support that I needed to begin with because my local area surgery did not know how to deal with me.
Right.
They didn't know what to do. And it was only when I moved away to another part of the country that the surgery there immediately got me the kind of mental health help that I needed. And I was shot up to the top of the list, and everything was just in place within weeks.
Indeed, you began by extolling the benefits of therapy, didn't you? Because you can't get through this stuff on your own, I don't think.
You cannot. You can try.
Yeah, of course.
And I tried for a year, but you need therapy. You need people who know how to deal with this, who know how to separate the bits that are you, the bits that are being imposed on you by other people, and the hole that you have been pushed into by the actions of someone else.
Yeah.
So that you realise that none of this is your fault. And once you accept that, then you can find the ladder to get yourself out of the hell. And that's what you need therapy for.
Gosh, thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
I just hope.
I guarantee
there
it
will be people.
It will be. I promise you.
So.
I promise you. It will be.
I hope so.
I know so.
So, yeah. Anyway, there you are.
Well, there you go. I bet you didn't think your Tuesday was going to pan out like this, did you, when you got up this morning?
No, I've got loads of work to do. Loads of stuff to do.
Well, you take a moment. Have a cup of tea. I think I will as well. And look after yourself. Continue to look after yourself, Margaret.
Thank you. I shall. And you too, and everybody else who's like this.
Thank you.
Because we're a very special club.
You're absolutely right. It's 11:12.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 14 minutes after 11, and I've broken all sorts of rules by not taking the news at 11 o'clock. I'll get into all sorts of bother, no doubt, when I make my way back upstairs after today's programme. But for the record, I'm afraid I wouldn't do anything differently were it to unspool again. And as you'd expect, an awful lot of love for Margaret coming in, but it does leave us in slightly uncharted waters time-wise. It's coming up to 11:15. I presume we'll carry on through till past now, will we? Or will we take another break? But I should probably have done this during the last break, but I'm just as discombobulated as you possibly are by the power of Margaret, from whom we heard a few moments ago. So I'm with you now till past. And we turn our attention next. It's a complete change of pace, a complete change of gear. In fact, historically one of my favourite, for want of a better word, subjects. And yet here's the thing that struck me this morning, when I was just sort of limbering up for our time together. I was looking at the that thing I said to you before introducing the conversation we've had about Hugh Edwards, about sometimes telling you that I'm not quite sure how to handle a conversation. I'm not quite sure what the best way into I know what I don't want to do. It's quite often in this kind of medium, there's loads of examples of what I don't want to do, loads of obvious questions, simplistic. Anyway, I used to be able to talk about Brexit in my sleep, right? I had so much knowledge. I'm not boasting. It wasn't a particularly pleasant achievement, but I had so much knowledge. I had so much understanding. I had so much evidence, largely from you to start with, from people like Kieran, the van driver, as we somewhat inadequately described him. It turned out to be an expert on a level that never really reached the Tory cabinet, the last several Tory cabinets, an expert on what leaving the customs union and the single market would mean for British imports and exports. And I can't remember those days. A sort of 2-year period immediately after the referendum when this radio programme went off like a rocket. Ended up on the front page of the New York Times because of those viral clips that we used to get of people ringing in to just spout Brexiter propaganda, Brexiter slogans, and for reasons that I will not understand as long as I live, nobody else was actually interrogating them. Whether it was coming from Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, or whether it was coming from, Bulldog Billy down the Dog and Duck. Nobody ever said, oh, go on then, just tell me. No one ever asked the second question. which was usually, oh, what laws is it that you're looking forward to not having to obey anymore? And for some bizarre reason, there's bizarre aligning of the planets that just meant this became the only place in the UK media where it was actually happening. And I mean, that's not an opinion, that's counting. So I didn't need any help at all. I could just come on air. There'd be another little wrinkle in the Brexit universe. I could come on air, take a breath, and that's it. I was off. I knew where to go. I knew what to say. I generally sometimes knew what the callers would do. I couldn't wait for someone angry to ring in who was absolutely adamant that they had all the answers. And then we'd just tug that little thread. YouTube's full of it. You can't swing a cat on YouTube for people ringing me adamant that I knew nothing and they knew everything. And within 30 seconds of the conversation starting, fell apart like cheap suits. In fact, I stopped enjoying it after a while. I'll tell you precisely the moment that I stopped enjoying it. I stopped enjoying it when my patriotism overtook my professionalism. When my love of my country actually began to supersede my love of my job. And also my love of what this particular chapter in British political history was doing to my job, pushing the programme to all the parts I should. Not going to lie to you, I thought it should have been in 10 years previously, but for whatever reason it hadn't. It hadn't scaled those dizzy heights, and then along came Brexit. But when that pendulum swung, and once that thought's in your head, you can't get rid of it. That's when I coined the phrase, it's very good for business, but it's very bad for the soul. You know, even as my book goes into the bestseller charts, there's still 52% of me is thinking, I wish that this hadn't happened. I wish we hadn't done such a stupid thing. And I use the word we, not you or they. I wish we hadn't done such a stupid thing. Because we all got parts to play. I wish we hadn't done such a stupid thing. So I could come on air between 2016 and, 2019, do you think? And I didn't even really need a run-up or a rehearsal, rehearsal, since when did we have rehearsals? But I didn't need any form of preparation or contemplation. Come on air, press the button, put a penny in the slot and I'm off. James O. Brexit. I haven't got a clue how to have these conversations anymore. Only really realised this morning. I haven't got a clue. Today's story is deeply significant, right? Trading goods between the UK and the EU, which is, if you care about such things, physically nearer than anywhere else, geographically closer than any other trading bloc or market that we might have access to, in terms of simple gravity, in terms of miles or kilometres or metres or whatever you prefer, whatever your unit of choice may be, it is nearer than anywhere else. And trade between the two, between them and us, which is, of course, what we are now, is getting worse, not better. It's getting worse. As a consequence of, wait for it, red tape. This is a new study by a university in Birmingham. I think it's Aston University. So let's pause now to allow everybody to shout, oh, Remainer universities, you can't trust them. It's reported in the Financial Times. Oh, you can't trust the Financial Times. They make it all up. They're all a bunch of Remainers. It's reported in the BBC. Oh, the BBC is so anti-Brexit, because that's what these people are reduced to now, claiming that reality doesn't exist, claiming that observable evidence is not real. You know, the same people probably who are comfortable claiming that Haitians are eating cats and dogs in Ohio are claiming that the BBC and the Financial Times and LBC and every other reliable news outlet in the country are wrong somehow and all of the importers and the exporters are lying. They're all making it up. Or if things are worse, it's all the fault of Gary Lineker, Carol Vorderman and James O'Bleeding Bryan. It's madness. So I can still do that stuff. I can still do the spiel, the shtick, the banter. Dreadful word, but I like it. I can still do all of that. I can still go off on a mad rant. And back in the day, I'd go off on a mad rant and you'd just start ringing me because you would always know roughly what I was going to ask at the end of the conversation. But I don't know how to have these conversations anymore. Many small UK producers have given up altogether exporting small amounts to the European Union because of all the extra rules and regulations. A vote to cut red tape created more, just as many people explained pretty much from the very beginning of the process that it would do. And if it wasn't explained enough before the referendum, my goodness me, it was explained in detail afterwards, particularly on this programme and often by Kieran, who became something of a media figure. I always remember thinking, I'm not exaggerating. We really are in the vanguard of this. When people were ringing up the producer of this programme to get Kieran's phone number so that they could sit in the cab of his van on Sky News and things like that, I still don't understand why they couldn't do that work for themselves. Just get in a lorry, try and import something and ask what's going to happen when they get rid of all the red tape. Or rather, introduce loads more. So this is Aston University Business School. Oh, yeah, well, you can't trust them. Seriously, I read on Twitter that everything's going brilliantly. You can't... Hey, by the way, something's bad happening in Germany. That means Brexit was a brilliant idea. I'm Andrew Neil. You read the Aston Business School, Aston University Business School, shows that UK goods exports to the EU fell 27%, imported goods by 32%. Why do you think there is less choice in your shops? And why do you think what's there costs a little bit more than it would do even with inflation and fuel crises? The variety of stuff we're exporting has dropped. 1,645 fewer types of British products exported to every EU country because British producers are giving up on small consignments, which will be affecting them everywhere. We spoke to the cheese fella, didn't we? Simon, I think his name was, had a cheese company up in the northwest. Sold it. He either sold it to a European supplier or he opened up a depot in continental Europe, creating jobs. Great. Brexit jobs, Brexit benefits for people still in the European Union. And farmers, clothing makers, wood and paper manufacturers are among the hardest hit industries. Do not attack the farmers. It's a bit of a misrepresentation that all the farmers voted to leave and that they all are now reaping what they sowed, pardon the pun. There may have been a marginally higher average in that sector than there were in some other sectors, but it was nowhere close to the kind of ratio that I used to think it was until I was re-educated by better informed callers. Edible fruits and nuts, if you're in that kind of business, it's Armageddon, down 73.5%. I'll say that again. If you had a business exporting edible fruits and nuts to the EU, your business has gone down by 73.5%. The further away the country, as you'd expect, the bigger the effect. The smaller and more distant EU countries have been affected the most. The bigger, closer countries affected the least, but the overall numbers remain absolutely shocking. And the bizarre bit, perhaps, is that it's getting worse, not better. You'd have thought that as businesses adjusted to the new requirements, the new regulations, the new red tape, you'd have thought that things might now be getting better. But you've had 8 years of complete denial. 4 different prime ministers, all dedicated to denial. You know, well, maybe not. Yeah, so May, Truss, Johnson, Sunak. Yeah, 4 different prime ministers, all dedicated to complete denial. May, perhaps least forgivably of all, because she's the one that knew the truth. And that's perhaps why things have got worse. And they're supposed to get even worse this year, aren't they? I think they've postponed it again. New checks and regulations coming in on fruit and vegetables. So everything is getting worse. And we dotted every I and crossed every T together between 2016 and 2020, let us say, between the referendum result, Razor's Edge referendum result, and Boris Johnson claiming that he would get Brexit done, getting elected on the back of a promise to get Brexit done. And I guess that's when we stopped talking about it. All the blooming time. When he, quotes, got it done, end quotes. When he got rid of pretty much every member of his own parliamentary party with a scintilla of overt integrity because they had the audacity to stand up and tell the truth about what a no-deal Brexit would mean. And off it goes. And here we are. And I don't know how to talk about it anymore. It's the strangest thing. It's a bit like Tom Jones forgetting how to sing Delilah. I imagine that, I don't know, Shaking Stevens forgot the words to This Old House. I need a slightly more up-to-date reference. Imagine if Taylor Swift forgot the words to Shake It Off. Or never, ever, ever, ever getting back. What's after that? I forget. I'm never, ever. I don't know how to talk about it anymore, and I don't understand why. It's extraordinary. So how do we talk about it now? Because you have to now start talking about it in the context of the current government. Listen, I'm not going to stop reminding you. In fact, I did a bad job yesterday on the Keir Starmer story. I should have hit you much harder with all the things that Boris Johnson accepted from donors that nobody really batted an eyelid at. The food was the big one. We did only remember that towards the end of the program. They couldn't even buy their own dinner. Boris Johnson and his former mistress, now wife, couldn't even buy their own dinner. They're having dinner delivered by Lord Bamford, a big Brexiter, actually. Oh, there, it's all coming back. That's what I used to do. I used to knit it all together like that. Now I sound like Donald Trump talking about weaving. They used to get their dinner delivered to the back door of Downing Street because they couldn't even pay for it. I still don't think we ever found out who paid for his freebie holiday on a Caribbean island. He'd take everything. Wallpaper, dinner, food, home decor. So double standards on display yesterday were epic, and I think perhaps I slightly overcompensated in covering the Keir Starmer story. But we live and learn. It's a new era. It's a new age. And how on earth in this new age do we talk about this continuing cancer at the heart of British business, this self-imposed cancer in the core of our international commerce? It's absolutely extraordinary. It genuinely is. I don't know how to talk about it anymore. I don't know how to launch this conversation. Let me try a couple of things that you might like, all right? What should Keir Starmer do? 0345 6060973. That might be all we've got, because I'd love to know how it's affected your business, but that feels like something we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago. How it was going to affect your business was something we were talking about 7 or 8 years ago. And all of the Brexity types would say, no, it isn't. Everything's going to be great. And now, so do you know what they send to me now? The tiny dwindling band that are still listening. Do you know? So the ones that you say, oh, it's all rubbish. It's all Project Fear. You're making it all up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's a Remainer conspiracy. Do you know what they say now? They say, no one wants to listen to this. Please move on. Please talk about something. It's amazing, isn't it? It'd be a bit like winning the World Cup in 1966. And by 1967, everyone's going, can we never mention the football again? That's how proud I am of the victory that we secured last year. Please stop talking about Jeff Hurst's hat-trick or Nobby Stiles' teeth. We never, ever, ever want to hear about the football again. So that's how big the victory is. The people queuing up now to tell me are desperate that we stop talking about it, because nobody likes to be reminded of the evidence of their own stupidity. And I don't think you are necessarily stupid, but if you're now claiming that you don't want to talk about it, then I'm afraid you are. You're stupid, because you have to talk about bad things in order to improve them. And that's why I worry about Keir Starmer. Is he is not talking about it at all. And when he does, he's not talking about it in any way that suggests he has a particular plan to improve things. So let's come at it from both angles. How do we talk about Brexit? 0345 60973. But as we learn that the impact upon British business, already profound, is actually getting worse, perhaps we can draw upon our reservoir of expertise and evidence-based contributors and ask, what would it take to make it get better? I don't think you can get rid of most of the red tape without even with full regulatory alignment. If you're not an actual member, if you're not a fully paid up member, you can't do it. Which reminds me of the sports club analogy we used to wheel out every week, every day, every hour. Do you remember? Yes, I'm going to leave the club, but I expect to retain full access to all of the facilities, including the sauna, the steam room, the treadmills, and the showers. I'm terribly sorry, you can't come in at all. And if you do, you're going to have to pay a premium in order to access the facilities that the members can access with unlimited pleasure for a flat fee. We're back there as well. So what are we going to do, you and me? How are we going to do this? How are we going to talk about Brexit? And how can Keir Starmer stop the rot? How can he actually stop the continuing deterioration of British trade with the EU? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 minutes after 11. There was one figure came out in January. I don't know why it was bobbing up and down again on social media yesterday. £311 billion over a period of years, the cost to the UK economy of Brexit. I don't think anyone argues with that anymore. Let me deal with, I think we're probably, I haven't had a look yet, but we're bound to have some applicants for Idiot's Corner on a day like today, aren't we? But let me deal with something that isn't necessarily Idiot's Corner. The idea that because services, revenues on services, trade in services with the European Union has actually done a lot better than expected, that somehow constitutes a benefit of Brexit. It doesn't. It's not a consequence of Brexit at all. Brexit will have made trade in some services actually a little harder, but because EU enforcement in that field is quite lax, and because e-working, partly as a consequence of COVID, has become much more popular, that is one area in which predictions have turned out not to be as accurate. One area of trade in which predictions have turned out not to be as accurate as they were in all other areas. You also have weak sterling still. Historically weak sterling, weaker than it would have been since 2016, which means that a lot of US companies are now outsourcing some services to the UK. But the pre-Brexit estimates on how service might be hit, how trade in services might be hit, underestimated chiefly how little effort the EU puts into enforcing its rules in this field, as opposed to trade in goods and free movement of people. But also free movement of goods as opposed to free movement of services, but also how much the working world has changed. There are more potential problems on the horizon, by the way, with the new entry-exit system and new and further and more changes to regulation. So things are, to contradict D. Ream, things can only get worse, really, in the current context, which makes the question of what Keir Starmer should do quite urgent, and yet his answer to that question is, I don't know, wait and see pie. So there's two ways into this. How do we, as people who both predicted and mourn the tragedy of Brexit, continue the conversation, but also what can Keir Starmer do? What should Keir Starmer do? 11:37 is the time. Hans is in Gravesend. Hans, what would you like to say?
Well, I think, leaving the EU is the worst thing that the United Kingdom could have done. You guys had a really pretty good deal. The border checks were in France. Now they're going to have to come to the UK. The free movement of goods has meant price increases here in the UK supermarkets. Also, I didn't vote for Brexit. I wasn't even allowed to vote because I'm a European citizen living in the UK, so we don't have any voting rights here, only for local elections. It's going to be pretty hard, and Europe is not going to make it easy for the United Kingdom either. And should the UK ever want to rejoin the EU, it will have to be on the terms of the EU like any other country. So the pounds will have to go, it will have to be the euro.
A little bit. There may be a little bit of wiggle room there, but we are rehearsing things we already know here, Hans, and I am trying to redirect attention to the road ahead rather than the rearview mirror. I appreciate you're describing the terms of a renegotiation or a re-entry, but there is a hell of a lot to cover before we even get to that. One of the reasons we're having this conversation today is I saw a little interview or a comment from Robert Peston, the ITV political editor, suggesting that he can envision another referendum in 10 years' time, which gives us an idea of even the optimistic timescale in play. So what should Keir Starmer be doing now on this front?
Start renegotiating, leaving the door open, be reasonable about what the terms and conditions are.
Well, he's failed on that. I mean, my information is that he's put a few noses out of joint in Brussels by sort of taking Erasmus off the table. And I know people might say it's a negotiating tactic, but some of the trade experts that I follow very much of the view that he's not making friends at the moment and that he needs to, because we come at everything from a position of unprecedented weakness.
Yeah, that is correct, I would say.
So apart from that, I mean, what about the public? Okay, how should he be talking about it to the British people?
Be open and honest, because when the Brexit referendum was taking place, the British people were misinformed.
This is the topic, isn't it? This is the answer. This is also part of the solution to my problem of not knowing how to talk about it. Is it time for Keir Starmer to start telling the truth to the British people about Brexit?
Yeah, it should be.
He thinks it isn't.
I mean, I used to work for the NHS, so we were promised loads of money that was going to Europe, going to the NHS. That never happened.
I saw another story today that almost all of the staff recruitment that's happened in the NHS in the last year was from non-UK and non-EU workers.
Yeah, that is correct.
I mean, what did people actually vote for? Don't forget, everyone knew exactly what they were voting for. And if it's all gone horribly wrong, it's absolutely nothing to do with the people that told you it would all go brilliantly right. It's all the fault of people who understood things. But there it is. At some point, I mean, who could even argue with that? Who could even argue with the idea that at some point the Prime Minister of this country is going to have to tell the people the truth about Brexit, the unvarnished, unalloyed, undiluted truth? And that would include the financial projections. That would include the surveys of business. It would include the figures, the facts, the numbers. I don't know where that lands badly anymore, apart from, kind of weirdos on socials. I don't know in real life. I mean, even the Daily Mail writes about betraying Brexit. Starmer has worked very, very hard carrying the old Ming vase across the ice rink to cut off all potential accusations of that. But he's in Downing Street now. So the phone-in, perhaps the weekly phone-in we have now, is it time yet for Keir Starmer to tell the people the truth about Brexit? The problem with that is who's going to ring in and say no? There you go. I've got 2 phone lines free. 3, actually, if you include the one that Hans is vacating now. Hans, thank you. Who's going to say no? Is it time for Keir Starmer to tell the truth about Brexit? No, James, it's not, because 0345 6060 973. The other problem you have here, of course, is some people will still be denying the truth about Brexit. But the problem I've got is it's as if Starmer's enthralled to the people still denying the truth about Brexit. And the only way you ever begin the process of shutting them down is by starting to tell the truth. It's like the good old days. Vikram's in Hounslow. Vikram, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. With regards to that Brexit, I believe the first thing that Keir Starmer should do, he should come into Parliament and actually make a statement about what he knows exactly about the current fallout of the Brexit, so that people can see that he's saying so in Parliament, so that will hold some weight with regards to what he's actually explaining. So that could possibly be his first ticket out of the issue he's currently facing with regard to the red wall areas. The second thing that he should do is to actually initiate a public inquiry and nominate Dominic Grieve to sit on this, so that he can actually, again, give substance to that inquiry for people to see that there is something behind it.
What would be the remit of the inquiry? What, in a sense, would be the overarching question that it was designed to answer?
To be frank with you, because it's going to be so broad.
Yes, exactly.
So there's going to be a lot of work to be done. But I suspect that if there is one thing that needs to be looking into, and why you have some newspapers that keep on banging about, the benefits of Brexit, there is a financial ramification into this, and it needs to be looked into, as well as all the MPs that served into Parliament up to the last general elections. It should be publicly declared who actually got a European passport just after 2016.
Oh, really? Do you consider? Why do you care about that so much?
I have a feeling.
You just want to highlight the hypocrisy of these people.
There is a definite hypocrisy, because
I mean, that's a little bit like bears defecating in the woods, isn't it? I mean, the average prominent Brexiter is very much the definition of disingenuousness, dishonesty, and/or epic weapons-grade, nuclear-powered ignorance.
There are many of them who do have, their sort of
dual nationality,
should we to say, and they have taken advantage of European territories to go and do this, with the exception of one who now has failed miserably. I'm not even going to take his name, but there are a few, and then there is one who's actually sunning himself in the middle of France. So,
I don't know if that is the territory of public inquiry. I'm a big fan of personal vendetta, Vikram, but I don't know if it's the business of public inquiry. I think the question they would answer is, what has Brexit done to Britain? And then you could look at everything.
Completely broken Britain, because
that's a good title for a book.
Yes, indeed. I don't want to ask even the Commission to actually put that on the table, because that would actually resolve the answer straight away. But look, for Keir Starmer to go to Italy and say, look, Leonardo is going to invest a couple of billions, is very rich, because that doesn't make any impact on the small business that has to trade with Europe. You know, the guy who's actually buying, before Brexit, you could buy things and be selling into Germany or Austria, and people were buying on eBay from Europe.
And sending it friction-free, no tariffs,
exactly.
Absolutely no checks or anything at all. And I don't know quite how people process the removal of that, except through either denial or obfuscation. Vikram, I wonder whether you're right, about having... The problem always with these conversations, it's a little bit like talking about Donald Trump, is that the liars are part of the conversation. The liars are an equal and opposite part of the conversation still. So, you know that if you set up an entirely independent, objective inquiry into how Brexit has impacted the country, when the news comes back negative, the usual suspects stand up and attack the messenger. They claim the inquiry wasn't independent. They claim it wasn't objective. Like Donald Trump talking about fake news or alternative facts, or claiming that the sky is I don't know, bright yellow rather than blue. They say it, and it becomes part of the discourse. But it's got to be progress, and then the calculation becomes how many people out there are ready for the truth, even if they were swallowing the rhetoric until relatively recently. And then you move into what Vikram referred to as the red wall constituencies, the people who thought that Boris Johnson was going to deliver some brave new dawn. Are they ready for the unvarnished reality of what they ushered in by putting Boris Johnson in Downing Street? I think that they probably are. And at some point, we're going to have to start treating the people who aren't with a modicum of, well, either ambivalence or ideally contempt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
49 is the time. Just a quick nod back towards the first conversation we had today, which obviously many of you still engaged in or reeling from. Secret Barrister on Twitter, The Secret Barrister, at Barrister Secret, as ever, providing very, very, very clear-headed analysis of some of the disputed or confusing facts of the Hugh Edwards case. But we're talking about something completely different now. And I'm beginning to feel it. This is nice from Marks. It's nice hearing it in your voice, James. I can feel the old Brexit twinkle returning to your eye. I never have. Did I have a Brexit? Suddenly the twinkles went out, Mark. And at precisely the moment that my professional pomposity or peacocking's nicer than pomposity, when the professional peacocking got overtaken by the patriotism. It was a bit like being punched in the stomach. Have you ever been winded? Like properly winded? Have you ever fallen out of a tree? Imagine if someone's just turned their radio on now and they think that's the phone-in. Have you ever fallen out of a tree? 0345 6060 973. My friend Scott would give me all the money in the world if I ever did a phone-in on have you ever fallen down a well. He's obsessed with people going about their daily business, probably in the countryside, and falling down an abandoned well. Now, I'm not laughing at people who've hurt themselves falling down abandoned wells, but I don't know. He just has a curious combination of the slapstick and the unexpected. But if you've ever been properly winded, I remember. I can't remember exactly where I was, but I think I was in a car, possibly listening to someone else on the radio, and I remember thinking, oh, Lord, this isn't just a conversation. This is my country, and everything's going to get much worse. And the pleasure in pulling down the pants of people who'd fallen for the lies of Johnson or Farage or whoever it was, the pleasure changed that day. It was still a public duty. It still needed to be done, but it was a lot less fun from that moment on. And now we're getting back into it. But how should the conversation be conducted? And what should Keir Starmer do differently? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Peter is in Sunderland. Peter, how are you?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm actually in Barrow-on-Trent. I don't know what Sunderland.
You must have been in Sunderland last time you rang me.
I was.
There it is.
I was.
So adjust the record. Let the record show. Peter is in Burton-upon-Trent. Is it Burton-upon-Trent or Burton-on-Trent?
I've been here 10 years and I don't really know.
That's the thing. You've driven past. How many times have you driven past that sign? I bet you don't even know who it's twinned with, do you?
God, everyone around is going to hate me now, James.
That's it. You've ruined your Burton credentials. But that's not why you rang in. For people who don't know, you are either the organiser or a key organiser of the regular Rejoin marches, the National Rejoin March. So there's no doubting what side of this conversation you're on. But what are your answers to the questions I've been asking?
Thanks, James. My answers to the questions are, first of all, I'm going to say no, Starmer shouldn't get up in front of British people and just tell the truth about Brexit.
Okay.
The reason is, they're irrelevant. We are where we are right now as a country, and so much stuff in our country that needs fixing, from housing to the NHS to roads.
Prisons. I'm just going to. I think your phone line's gone a bit funny, Pete. Just on the little clicky there. So we'll try and improve that and get back to you shortly, and we will do, because we'll carry on this conversation after the news, because I just rode completely roughshod over all the requirements and regulations of presenting radio programmes at the top of this hour. And if you don't know why, I'd remind you that you can enjoy full catch up on the Global Player, where you can rewind and pause live radio. Michael's in Stamford. Michael, what made you pick up the phone?
I'm a bit depressed, I'm not going to lie, James. I'm lying in bed. I've got COVID. I've been off a few days. I'm not feeling great.
Well, take that as a warning, everybody. We often talk as if it's gone away, but it
hasn't gone away, mate. Trust me.
And it's horrible. It's horrible. Who had it recently? Who was telling me that they'd had it? Anyway, we digress. Carry on.
I just wanted you to cheer me up, actually.
Oh, Lord,
because it's been pretty depressing so far. It's been a hard radio phone-in, and I just wanted to send a love and support to all those people that phoned in with those horrific stories, and that's hard to phone up and hard to deal with. I work in a school, so I have a huge load of sympathies. What I wanted to ask was, do you think there's any hope for the future? Do you think there's any hope?
What? You can't.
Not in general.
What's this, a radio phone-in? You don't ring in and ask me questions.
I
let you through.
I want you to make me feel better, because I feel like crap.
Okay. Well,
is there any possibility in any alternative universe that we will ever go back to the European Union? Is there any hope of that? Is there any process that could be reignited, that we could go back? Is it a thing we could do, or is it a done deal?
No, of course it's reversible. How old are you?
50 next week.
Oh, you sound much younger.
Yeah.
I was hoping you were going to say like 28, and I would say definitely in your lifetime.
I hope so.
So Peston says another referendum in 10 years. I hope I'm not misrepresenting him. I only sort of scanned over what he was writing. I think he's got a new book out, and it was an interview attendant upon his new book. I'm a big fan of Robert Peston. He says a referendum in about 10 years, and that would then involve the rubric of rejoining. The thing is, and I think a lot of people on our side of the argument don't understand this completely, the EU aren't going to be remotely interested in our application until the debate is over in this country.
It's never going to be over, is it?
No, it is. But by over, I don't mean every single Brexiter has seen the error of their ways or passed away. I just mean that there's not going to be a parliamentary bun fight about it. The last thing they want to do is sit on the sidelines with the important resolutions, treaties, agreements for themselves at stake, and watch us have a kind of Punch and Judy show with people like Boris Johnson and Nadine Dorries inexplicably on the big stage. So there'll still be people in the background making weird noises. But Brussels, the European Union, won't be ready to take us seriously again until we've started being serious. The
irony being, though, of course, that if we went to vote tomorrow, I think we'd win. I think we'd get it back in. I don't think you'd get the turnouts you got before. I don't think you'd have the people hating you the way you did before. I think you would get 60-40, 70-30. I just don't think it's I don't think the arguments are strong anymore.
I don't know if you'd get it tomorrow. The arguments are all over. All you've got is the narrative of betrayal and victimhood, which is inevitable, particularly for sort of elements of the Brexit support was sort of far right adjacent. Some of it was far left adjacent. But the shift from failure to victimhood, from making promises, failing, and then claiming that you're a victim is epic. You're seeing a lot of it in politics at the moment. But
on another note, I just wanted to say as well that a lot of what you said resonated with me this morning about fake news and Trump and everything that's gone on in the last sort of decade, really, of social media and news and fake news and media news and right-wing news.
Well, it's all linked.
In this country,
It's all tied together. I know you can't separate. And Russia, you didn't mention Russia. Russia is a huge part of it as well. And finally, people are coming to realise that to be true as well, despite the canaries down the coal mine. Most obviously, I suppose, Carol Cadwallader being roundly and viciously abused by people who frankly should have known better. But I better late than never, I suppose. This is nice from Jamie. He could start by just telling the truth about Brexit. We'll go back to Peter, I think, after the news and why he thinks that would be the wrong move to make. And Peter's up to his elbows. No, he's not. He's up to his neck in rejoin rhetoric and rejoin sentiment. But Jamie goes, what famous, talking about Burton-on-Trent, where Peter is calling from, which famous football manager's son managed Burton Albion? Oh, that's got to hurt. You could have just said which famous footballer managed Burton Albion, which famous football manager managed, but who's the most famous manager for Burton Albion I've ever had? And you're right, I don't even need a clue. It was Nigel Clough. I had my most successful bet ever on Burton Albion when Nigel Clough was manager. Have I ever told you this story? It's not my best anecdote, but seeing as I only have 11, I'm trying to expand my repertoire. I don't know if I've ever told you this one before. So I was in a pub in Norwich. Do you know, we might talk about the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street later in the programme. And, of course, it is the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre that remains the absolute holy grail of radio phone-in topics. Aha. And a bloke told me to put a bet on a horse. And I didn't really know anything about betting, so I did. And the horse won. So I had all this money in my bookmaker's account that I'd only opened on that occasion. And I had a look at the odds for a match between Burton Albion and Manchester United, and for reasons I will never know, I put £50 on a 2-2 draw. Can you believe it? And there was a 2-2 draw, and it was such an extraordinary bet. I think I was the only person in the country that actually had put money on a 2-2 draw between. It may have been 1-1. Don't at me. There was definitely a score draw in the FA Cup. Do you know what happened? I actually got sent a shirt sponsored. So the bookmaker sponsored Burton Albion for that game. And they sent me a shirt in the post with all the signatures of the entire Burton Albion team on. I told you it wasn't a very good anecdote.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are we're looking backwards and forwards at the same time, which I tell you what, it takes it out on your neck, doesn't it? That's tricky. Well, not if you use mirrors, I suppose. We're looking backwards and forwards at the same time because we are fondly remembering conversations that we used to have about Brexit up until the moment where we realised that we were actually chronicling the entirely unnecessary self-inflicted decline of our own country. So the patriotism kicked in, and the sort of mischief and peacocking of making adamant, angry people look stupid every day, which I enjoyed enormously for years, suddenly stopped being so enjoyable when you realise that, you know, the people punching holes in the side of the ship while claiming it was going to make us go faster, we're going to sink the ship for all. Oh, that's good. We're going to sink the ship for all of us. That's the one, isn't it? 8 years I've been waiting for that analogy. The people punching holes in the side of the ship while claiming it was going to make us go faster, we're going to do damage to everybody travelling on that ship, i.e. HMS UK, HMS Britannia, call it whatever you will. But so then we stopped enjoying it, and then we slowly stopped talking about it, inevitably perhaps, because Boris Johnson got it done, remember? It was oven ready, wasn't it? Yeah, right. And now, of course, the reality is becoming unignorable. The latest evidence of that being that trade between the UK and the EU is actually getting worse. And it does actually make sense because we are now out of EU supply chains. So you might have thought business will eventually improve because it will adapt. Business has to always. It's like a kind of commercial equivalent of Darwinian evolution, survival of the fittest. But it's also unnecessary. And it is the job of the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister we've had who is not handcuffed to the millstone of Brexit, even as the ship begins to sink. He could actually do something about it, but he isn't. And Peter is persuaded that he shouldn't, at least not in the way that some of us think. And Peter's qualifications in this field are pretty impressive, as well as the organiser of the National Rejoin March, which will be coming to London the weekend after this one, I think, just under 2 weeks. Peter, where were we? Apart from Burton, up on Trent. I
was hoping you were going to bring that back up, and I can't wait of it. Never mind. So like I was saying, we know all the problems that we've got in this country.
Well, you do, and I do.
well, a lot of people like on the ground we see it with our own eyes. We live it every day, you know.
Yeah.
So we do see it, and what Starmer needs to do, in my opinion, is say, so this is where we are. So we want all of these things improving. We've kind of got a plan how to improve them all, but it all costs money. So where are we going to get that money from? We can put your taxes up. We can take other stuff away from you to use that money to pay for it. Or we could do something that might improve the economy between 5 and 8% and almost overnight bring investment to the country, which means more tax money, which means more money to spend on the stuff we need to do to improve. And that is to apply to rejoin the EU. Or at the very least, right now, if it's possible, which I'm not sure it is, go for just single market access maybe. But that's what he needs to do, in my opinion. Stop looking backwards. There's just no point anymore. You know,
I've
loved listening to you this morning already, James. Right, and it brought back lots of memories.
Same.
And I think you need to carry on talking about it, because if you're not, frankly, a lot of the time, it is in the media at the moment.
I'm enjoying this one more than the last couple of times, but I do think you're wrong, and I think you know you're wrong. You just don't realise it yet. Oh, so this is like the old days, isn't it? Except I'm talking to a Remainer.
For the wrong reason,
I'm talking to a rejoiner, and I'm using the language of the good old days, the good old gammon days.
Because you call me gammon?
No, I said the good old gammon days. Okay. Because you've done it yourself. You've sort of said that he has to establish the need for fiscal improvement. You can't establish the need for fiscal improvement without detailing the fiscal decline. You can't tell people that this is going to raise 5 to 8% more without explaining how we lost it.
So what you're saying is we should have a Brexit assessment before doing what I think.
Yeah. This is what Vikram suggested, a public inquiry. I don't know what you'd call it, but and the problem is that would involve, you'd need to find, and I don't know if there are any. Can you think of a famous Brexiter who has said sorry yet? Can you think of one? Because you'd need to have, if there is such a thing, you'd need to have an intelligent, famous Brexiter.
This is what I always say, the difference between what I see as the Rejoin campaign and Remain is the main difference is we do have people who voted to leave supporting us.
But not prominent campaigners.
No, not prominent campaigns,
because they've got shame and pride. They've got shame and pride attached to it. So, but I'm just thinking about the persuadables.
There's Peter Bone, isn't he one who voted to leave and is quite vocal about being wrong? Is it Peter Bone? I've probably got that name wrong.
I think you might have got that one.
Ignore me.
I mean, there is someone called Peter Bone, and he certainly was an MP. I haven't checked whether he retained his seat at the last election.
No, he wasn't an MP. He was a journalist, I think.
Oh, well, it's not him then. It's not him that you're thinking of.
I've got the name wrong.
No, don't worry. That's all right. But what I'm talking about is trust in the inquiry. So you're going to have the usual liars shouting at it and accusing it.
That's why I almost think the inquiry is almost pointless, and to me waste time. We know it's hurt the economy. We can see it with our own eyes, like you were saying before. Every time we go shopping and look at the shelves, we can see the effects of Brexit.
No, that's not true. Here's a picture of a supermarket in Swansea that's got loads and loads of food in it. That proves you're lying.
Yeah, well, maybe them people don't go shopping themselves every week, and cushions.
Is it Pete? Are you thinking of Oborne? You're thinking of my mate Peter Oborne, I think, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And a wonderful journalist. Wonderful, right? Well, actually, so you bloody well should. That's quite insulting to call anybody Peter Bone.
It really is.
Possibly even Peter Bone would be insulted at being called Peter Bone. I know I would be if I was Peter Bone. But Peter Oborne is a very different kettle of fish, and has changed his mind about lots of things in recent years, and articulated his reasons for doing so quite beautifully. But he wasn't a prominent Brexit campaigner. I think he was probably working at the Spectator at the time, which very Brexit adjacent, but not not someone whose name springs immediately to mind when you think of the people who told us that we would now be living in a country with no immigrants, for example, if that was the thing that floated your boat, or no waiting lists on the NHS, if that was the thing that floated your boat, or more money in your pocket and cheaper clothes, if that was the thing that floated you. Oh, look, here's Victoria in Glasgow. I actually listened to an interview that you did with Jacob Rees-Mogg the other night on YouTube, James. To hear that imbecile go on about cheaper food and clothes and shoes really got my goat. Yeah, I do remember that interview. It was a very illustrative moment in Brexit, because he was a prominent Brexiter, the former MP, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and founder, I think, of a failed hedge fund as well, although he made a ton of money out of it before it failed. He was a very good example of someone who could say stuff. He could say all that stuff. It's worth looking at that interview on YouTube. And certainly last time I saw it a few years ago, some of the comments underneath were siding with him, because you could say all that then. You could say, oh, cheap shoes for peasants. Or you could say food will be cheaper, fuel will be cheaper, waiting lists will be short. You could say all of these things. But the question was, and you could then explain why that wasn't true, but you couldn't prove it because you didn't have a crystal ball. It should have been better conducted in the media, that conversation, but for reasons that Emily Maitlis can explain a lot better than I can, right up to the BBC, they used to think, and in some ways still do, that if you've got 100 astronomers explaining what the moon is made of, sitting on that side of the debate, and one astronomer on that side of the debate who insists it's made of cream cheese, then you have to book one of the 100 who insists that the moon is made of moon, and then the only astronomer in the universe who thinks that the moon is made of cheese. And you invite them both onto Newsnight, and you have a debate as if they're equal and opposite forces, as if they are both authoritative forces with an equal chance of being right. Emily calls it the Minford paradigm, because the economist who was the fiscal equivalent of the astronomer who believes that the moon is made of cheese was called Minford, Patrick Minford. And if you were working at the BBC at the time, you'd have 1 million economists who could explain to you why it was a really bad idea, and one who thought it was a great idea. And you'd have to book them both. And you'd sit there and go, oh, well, thank you very much. And you, of course, disagree. And this back to anecdote time, aren't we? The moment for me that encapsulated this most. I'll tell you in a minute, because I just want to check with Peter. When's the next march, Peter, and how's it looking?
It's a week. No, it's Saturday the 28th September. I'm just going to say the date instead of trying to count days. So it's
that's a week on Saturday, you prune.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
You're the bloody organiser. You're the organiser. It should be tattooed to the inside of your eyelids.
I know when it is. I just didn't know how many days away we are. But yeah, Saturday the 28th September, meet us all at Park Lane by the Hilton Hotel. We're going to march straight through London onto Parliament Square. We've got some wicked speakers who are going to convince you that rejoining is the way forward. What
is the purpose? Because it's not going to make any difference tomorrow, is it? We're not going to wake up on the 29th or the 30th of September and the political debate will have changed. But you are keeping the flame alive, aren't you?
Yeah, we really have to. But the purpose really is to get media attention and the politicians' attention, because they are still, all of them, a lot of the media and almost all politicians, although the Greens and Lib Dems have spoken about it last week or two. We just need them to start talking about this, and not just about, like I said before, not just about what went wrong with Brexit, etc., because it's the past and we can't change the past, but what we can do is change the future. And that's what we need to do. And I know there's lots of people, especially activist campaigners, who are burnt out because of the election we've just had. And frankly, 14 years of horrific government. But we can't stop now. I need everyone to be there. Even if I'm burnt out. But
no, I admire your. I salute, at risk of going a bit George Galloway, I salute your indefatigability. I really do, and you are doing important work, and you are keeping a flame alive, a flame that has come perilously close in recent years, certainly on this programme, to being snuffed out, but you can't snuff it out because reality keeps coming back with a little sort of blast of oxygen to revivify the flame. And today's little oxygen hit is the study from Aston University Business School showing that the UK goods exports to the EU is down 27% and traffic in the other direction, the stuff coming in, is down by 32%. And crucially, it's all about to get worse. And you go back to January of this year, and another report suggested that by 2035, that's not that far away, by the way. It's 11 years away in old money. That's maths, that is. By 2035, the hit to the British economy caused by the self-inflicted damage done to our trade will stand at a whopping £311 billion. I'm not pausing for effect. I'm just swallowing.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:18, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where do not adjust your sets. This is not Groundhog Day or indeed a recording from several years ago. We are discussing the insanity, the continuing insanity of Brexit, which is no longer in the realms of opinion, but is instead in the realms of counting. And depending what you're counting or indeed who you are relying on, we are looking at a 27% drop in imported goods from the EU, a 32% a drop in going the other way compared with what it predicts, what Aston University Business School predicts would have happened without Brexit. And crucially, it is getting worse, not better, as we move ever further from EU supply chains. And then two more stories that you may not be aware of. One from Kieran, the Euro courier, as he's rebranded himself, no longer Kieran the van man, Kieran the Euro courier. If you were rude to Kieran back in the day, I wonder whether you're still rude now that he's been proved right about absolutely everything that he told us on several occasions, and indeed ended up telling other members of broadcast media after they tapped us up for his phone number. Everything from what border posts would look like between Switzerland and the EU, right through to how much paperwork you'd need, for example, to take an orchestra's instruments into the European Union or for a band to go on tour. Every single thing this man told us has come true. So I wonder if you were involved in the personal abuse of Kieran, how much attention you'll be paying to what he's telling you now? Or is your head still so far up your backside that you can't even tell what day it is, let alone what he's saying? 31st of October 2024, new legislation require all hauliers entering the UK to submit an entry summary declaration, ENS. That's part of the broader safety and security GB requirements, and it is crucial for ensuring the safety and security of goods entering the country. But it also means that hauliers need to prepare now to avoid disruptions to their operations. And he references Keir Starmer and his claim that we want to reset relations with Europe, but the realities of Brexit are still there for the foreseeable. And that, in many ways, is the point that we're making. How can he keep saying that if he won't actually detail and describe the realities of Brexit? And that's only one of the things on the horizon. The other one was post-Brexit checks on fruit and vegetables being brought into Britain from the EU. These have now been delayed for the third time. Do you know why they've been delayed? Delighted. Because suppliers have warned that they could and probably would lead to higher prices for shoppers. So you're looking at celery and tomatoes. The plans were for that to be introduced from the 1st of January of next year, will now be postponed by another 6 months in a move that would give it more time to understand the impact on businesses. And that's the third delay in the past 12 months. I wonder if they're actually the same delays. The same legislation. I don't think it is, but either way, more red tape, more problems, more confusion, more damage, all self-inflicted by people who continue to waltz around the place as if they have won some wonderful victory. So how do we continue the conversation, and what should Keir Starmer be doing differently? Mark's in Cheshire. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hey, James.
Hey, Mark.
I think the last time we spoke was about a chocolate frog or something else.
What was that about?
Oh, it's about a year and a half ago. I'm a chef.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, to get to the point.
Yes.
When the vote was allowed, when we had to vote for Brexit, me and many, many more of my countrymen were not allowed to vote. It was called a 5-year vote.
Yeah.
And we were forbidden. We were not allowed the franchise.
Where were you?
I was in Italy with my now ex-wife, but that's another story.
But why weren't you allowed to vote?
Because I lived outside of the country.
Yeah, so you're British. You're British, but you'd been out of the country for more than 5 years. It's a weird rule, that. I didn't really understand that rule, to be honest.
No, I know. And every time I try and highlight this and say, do you know what, mate? I would have voted if the 2 million, 3 million people who were expats were allowed to vote.
Long-term expats. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some of them might have voted to leave. There was plenty of that in Spain. I used to see
no. They all have blue rinses and live in, I don't know.
Vox Pops.
But
we digress. What should Starmer be doing now?
Right, bite the bullets. Bite the bullets.
Go on.
Give us the vote again.
Well, you can't do that yet.
No.
I can't bear it. Could you imagine seeing Farage on your telly every 10 minutes again?
Well, you know what? Farage has been on your programme earlier this morning, and
He has not been on my programme, Mark. How dare you?
No, not yours. He was on...
He hasn't appeared on this programme since he was dragged out of the studio by his own PR advisor after soiling himself spectacularly live on the national radio.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digress.
Give us... Yeah, we do digress.
But then we're not ready we're not ready for a referendum.
You know, mate, maybe we are.
I don't think we are. Would you really be up for it? Could you imagine the campaign? I mean, look, we've got to get... I don't know, though. Oh, no. Oh, how dare you confuse me in this fashion.
Sometimes you have to bite the bullet.
So I stop saying biting the bullet when I'm about to talk about boats with holes in. All right?
Okay, right.
You're mixing your metaphors.
I'm listening.
So the boat is full of holes. The boat is full of holes. And Starmer is tasking himself with plugging some of those holes. But you're reminding us that the biggest hole is Brexit. So
exactly.
Oh dear, you might have a point. So maybe the metaphor's not working. But what's the point of plugging all those holes if you're not going to plug that big hole?
Let's just...
It's all going to be David Bowie, hasn't it? Holes.
Yes, that's going to be David Bowie, yeah.
Holes. Holes.
I'm sorry I'm laughing.
And what?
James,
you have to laugh. If you didn't laugh, I love you, Mark.
I love every single thing that I hear in your programme.
I bet I can think of some things you didn't love.
Oh, well, there's some things, but you know what? Definitely not the right So, sorry.
No, that's all right. We had to dump that because you used a rude word. So there's something you don't like. You just got dumped for using a word that actually is a rude synonym for dump, ironically enough. Apart from calling a referendum, before he does that, he has to set out in forensic detail everything that's gone wrong, which is why I'm coming back to Vikram.
Exactly. He's a lawyer.
He can just say, here
lawyer.
It is.
He was the head of the...
This is the CPS, the head of the CPS.
Yeah,
this is what it's coming back to. Here it is. So, we'll have a vote. You can have another referendum on whether or not this is good or bad. £311 billion hit to the economy by 2035, according to this estimate, according to this forecast. 27% drop in imports, 32% drop in exports down 27, imports down 32. Businesses closing, businesses changing their modus operandi, changing their locations. You've got all sorts of stuff going on, and no one can claim this is good. So what is good? What are the benefits? All I ever see now, genuinely, services have gone up, and I can tell you categorically that has absolutely nothing to do with Brexit. That is, it's not quite a despite. Well, it is. It's a despite Brexit. There's nothing that Brexit did that has increased services in this country, trade in services in this country, except hit the pound very hard, which makes it attractive for American companies to outsource some of their business here as opposed to some other European countries. And they can do that because the EU's policing of this sector is much laxer than it is in the trade of goods. So some Brexiter says to you, well, services have gone up. That's a Brexit benefit. You say, what was it about Brexit that made services go up? And the only answer they can give that is in the realms of reality would be, well, it tanked the pound. Which doesn't sound like a Brexit benefit, does it? Really? So that's and the other one is countries in the European Union have economic problems. That's supposed to prove that Brexit was a good idea, which is a bit like saying, well, I've got cancer, but Johnny over there has got chicken pox, so I'm fine. I mean, it is just a stupid thing to say. Or actually, let me get a better analogy than that. So what you need to do is compare where that country would be. So let's say Germany, teetering upon the brink of recession, Where would it be if it wasn't in the European Union? Neck deep in recession. So you need to ask people to explain. So how would that make things better then? How would it make things better if they left the European Union? So they've got economic problems. If their Brexit or Jexit or whatever you want to call it look like ours, they'd have the economic problems that they've got already, and then they'd have a 27% fall in imports and a 32% fall in exports and a potential £311 billion hole in their economy by 2035. So how would that actually make things better? So you can smell the desperation of these people by, as ever, the patheticness of their arguments. The only difference now is that they are no longer unevidenced opinions based upon an unknowable future. They are unevidenced lies based upon a knowable present. Catherine is in Muswell Hill. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I want to say that I feel that there is a conversation to be continued, but it has to really change tone. And the emotive side of it, for me, has to come out of it. Because I, for one, can't bear bemoaning myself for the rest of my life.
It's numbers.
Economic decision. It's just a hard-headed, hard-nosed conversation to be had. And all the language around how painful it is and how much it hurts and blah, 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 I think just gets us caught up in the weeds, the emotional weeds.
You might be right.
And stops us getting anywhere. I have dual nationality, British and French. I've been able to pass that on to one of my children who's still a minor.
Yes.
So that was relatively easy, much less so for the ones who are...
I got confused then. You mean a minor with an O, don't you? Not a minor with an E.
Yes. Yeah, a minor with an O.
What's she talking about now? What's that got to do with he's a minor? Sorry, forgive me. Carry on.
But even that process makes me... I hate the fact that it feels quite a sort of self-interested one. Oh, look, I can protect the people I care about by getting them this, they'll have freedom to live and travel abroad, etc., etc. I don't, it doesn't make me feel very good about the whole thing. The fact that my children may or may not be able to side route it.
Yes. But I don't know that I'm ready yet. You might be a bit more mature than me, which, frankly, Catherine, isn't hard.
I'm glad you said it.
But someone had to. But don't we have to? It depends who the quotes enemy end quotes is, really, doesn't it? Because in a way, what you're saying is ignore the idiots and just focus on the data. So forget about relitigating Brexit wars, because in a way, the people who think that they won have now so obviously and categorically lost that to rub their faces in it might give you a sort of thrill. There might be some Schadenfreude involved, but it actually sets back the country's cause every time you do it.
Exactly. And I really think that is the only way to progress with the project.
Well, I'm not there yet, but I'm now aware of the potential destination, and I think you're probably right. The problem is I then glance to my right, and there's Mark sticking his hand, jumping up and down, begging to be put in Idiot's Corner. He writes, "Bore off, mate. You're simply absolutely no prizes whatsoever for guessing how he spells your. You're simply an annoying mouthpiece for the radical left, because if the radical left can be relied upon to do anything, it's calling for more business, more commerce, more trade, more international cooperation, and well done, mate. Idiot's Corner for you, Mark. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. The news bulletin, obviously, everywhere, not just here, dominated by news from France, which doesn't happen very often, but that case is so extraordinary. Of the rape case. I suspect colleagues will be talking about that later today. I couldn't bring myself to do it after the Hugh Edwards conversation that we had earlier today. It would have just been too much in similar space, and therefore we will almost certainly talk about it tomorrow. And I'll tell you now, what intrigues me, shocks me most about the story, beyond the crimes, is the collusion. The way that this man, who was inviting pretty much, it seems, everyone in town to, again, the trigger warnings all over the show today, to rape his wife. And they were all agreed. No one apparently said, no, thank you. And by the way, I'm calling the gendarmerie. That's the bit I can't get my head around. I don't know whether that's something we can talk about together tomorrow, but I thought I'd just sow the seed now to see what happens is that's the bit I don't get. I remember when we first started talking about grooming gangs on this programme in 2010, and noting that a particular type of grooming was much more prevalent among or in communities of Pakistani origin than it was elsewhere. There's no particular proclivity to that kind of crime unique to any ethnicity or religion. Otherwise, they'd have closed the Church of England down and the Catholic Church years ago. But the bit that shocked me most about those crimes, was the fact that if you were embarking upon an illegal relationship with a 15-year-old girl, that you were confident you could tell your friends, and they would either want to join in or not shock you in any way. That's the bit. Shall I say as a man here? I don't think so. I presume it's just as baffled. Maybe not. That's the bit that's the bit where, you see the list of local people who were involved in this crime, which he's now admitted, as you heard in the bulletin, and you heard Peter Allen talking about earlier today to Nick. That's the bit. I can't get my head around that bit. The bit where he goes, "Would you like to come around to my house tonight?" And nobody said. Nobody smashed his face in, actually. Forgive me. That's the bit I don't get. How come no one broke his nose at precisely that point and dragged him to the nearest police station? How would he know? How would he know that he was going to get a receptive audience or acquiescence? I don't know. Well, we've barely got time for this, actually, which is just as well, really, because it's not necessarily... So it's 12:37, right? Apologies to Mark and John and Dave and others. We will be returning to Brexit-related matters a little bit more regularly, perhaps, than we have over the last couple of years, because that is the patriotic necessity. Anybody saying, stop talking about it, only you care, those are people who hate their country and want the damage to continue unchecked because they're still too ashamed and guilty about the fact that they contributed to it. They voted for it. So we park that for now and turn our attention instead to the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre. It's not. I need to explain that joke, don't I? So Alan Partridge, who is, by all accounts, the best broadcaster in the country. Do we have a clip? Let's have a little listen to this.
Jill, what do you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre? I'll be honest, I'm dead against it.
It's going to be quite hard for me now to sound like not criticising colleagues. So what do you think about the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street? I'll be honest, I'm dead against it. It's classic radio phone-in territory. So I'm going to try and do it slightly differently. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, is planning to, in conjunction with the new government, to pedestrianise Oxford Street entirely within 2 years, creating a European-style boulevard with, it says here, planters, benches and water features. It's already got planters and benches. I'm just taking the mickey out of the journalism. I think it's a brilliant idea. Oxford Street's an absolute hellscape, particularly if you're just on the pavements. Never mind imagining what it would be like to try to navigate your way through it on wheels. It's a hellscape on the pavements. It takes you... especially if you get stuck behind a school group or something like that. So here's what I want to do. And it's 12:39, and I don't want to do a long introduction because essentially, listen to this and substitute the words Norwich City Centre for Oxford Street.
Jill, what do you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich City Centre?
Oxford Street.
I'll be honest, I'm dead against it.
I'll be honest, I'm not. I'm dead in favour of it, but I'm not. Anyway, I want you to call me if you're not in London. All right, that's the deal. So I as someone who likes visiting London, maybe not that regularly, but someone who sees London as sort of the HQ of UK PLC. So you are a tourist in your own country. You come to London, particularly like Oxford Street for the shopping, but you're not like me. Thank the Lord. Lucky you. But I work in Leicester Square. I used to live just off Oxford Street. So for me, Oxford Street would be my commute as a pedestrian when I was a much, much younger man. And so it should not be designed to suit my needs. Oxford Street, the biggest shopping thoroughfare in the entire country. As someone who visits London from outside or even perhaps from overseas, would you mind telling me what you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich. No, about the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street, because I think that we are parochial and small-minded sometimes, and we're also NIMBYs. And the idea that you turn the biggest shopping street in this country into a pedestrian-only zone in much the same way that Carnaby Street, which is just adjacent to Oxford Street, is 100 times more pleasant to shop in than Oxford Street is. It is progress. There are hardly any negatives to it. And it is simply not built for the volume of traffic that is currently on it. So phone lines are open. Hopefully get a call on before 12:45. Break the habit of a lifetime. My shortest introduction in history. But you're not allowed to ring me if you are a Londoner. 0345 6060 973. No Londoners allowed. And I include myself in that category, even though I have only lived here since the age of 19. So a pedestrianised Oxford Street is a good thing, because ... And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. And of course, people from elsewhere care about this, you prune, because people visit. London is one of the most visited cities in the world. And it does have, I think, or rather it lags behind a little bit on other countries. So ideally, we'll take calls from other countries where you have town planning that is dedicated to the pleasant experience of the average shopper stroke visitor, as opposed to, and I'm a big fan of the London black cabs, as you know. I was pretty much the only member of the media who stuck up for you when Uber was being injected into all of our existences through very shall we say, opaque circumstances during Boris Johnson's mayoralty. But I don't think that you win this one, lads. I think that Oxford Street belongs to all of us, and the idea of pedestrianising it makes the experience of shopping infinitely more pleasurable for everybody. I will take negatives. If they shut it to buses, which I believe is the plan, that might affect your life quite negatively, and we can weigh that up against all the positives that will be enjoyed by the rest of us. And you can't accuse me of an accidental partridge on this one, because I've played the actual partridge clip, and it speaks to something I can't articulate, because I'm not that kind of phone-in host. I never have been. I don't quite get it. It's a bit like the parking tickets, or the obsession with immigration, or the hard shoulders of the motorway. The stuff that I find interminably dull. But traditional regional radio phone-ins go absolutely mad for it. The pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre. I guard myself against accusations of plumbing the depths of phone-in topics by pointing out to you that Oxford Street is a national resource. Oxford Street is the biggest shopping street in the entire kingdom, and therefore its fate/future matters to us all. What about all the delivery drivers? They can deliver around the back. No one delivers in the front of Oxford Street, Daniel. Honestly, do keep up. So what do we think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre? Mike is in Copenhagen. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Interesting subject.
Don't be sarcastic.
I used to live in London.
Don't be sarcastic, Michael. It is. I know you're not being sarcastic. It is an interesting. So you don't sound very Danish. I hope you're not a Londoner.
No. I went to university in London, but lived there for a long time afterwards, and was used to sort of the packed out streets, buses, taxis, cars, and everything. And then, sort of 25 years ago, I moved to Scandinavia.
Oh yes.
And I was in centre of Copenhagen. There are huge areas of streets that are pedestrianised. They're green, they have plants, they have wild flowers, there are trees. The experience of just walking or cycling through the centre of Copenhagen compared to London, it's just a different planet.
Someone should write a song about how wonderful it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's packed with people every day. People sitting out, you sit out in the street to eat your lunch pack. Because there is no street. It's grass, it's trees, it's benches,
planters, water features. I don't know what this is about. Do you? Is it the tyranny of the motorist? Is it that this country, for whatever reason, remains completely enthralled to the motorist as opposed to the pedestrian, which on a massive shopping street is particularly bonkers, isn't it? Because people in cars can't go shopping.
I'm not convinced it's actually sort of barring to motorists. I think it's more Scandinavia, Amsterdam, Holland, and so on. People are more used to using bicycles.
You think that's a key factor?
If you look at Copenhagen, sort of 60% of trips inside Copenhagen people do by bike.
I know, I've been there. I've spent some time in Copenhagen.
There's not the use for cars.
So yeah, but that's the same. Yeah, but that's the same argument from the other side of the coin, because people used to use their cars in Copenhagen, but the town planners made decisions to make it a more pleasant experience for everybody, as opposed to just the people behind the wheels, just the people on four wheels.
Well, you see, it's a plan that's been rolled out over quite a few. They call it Copenhagenisation.
Yeah.
Cities. So that they're actually planning. They're doing some in New York with motorcycle highways.
Yeah, any downsides?
Not really.
No, there it is.
Not one that I've come with. You don't need a taxi because they also have these sort of pay for electric bikes knocking around. So we've
got them here as well.
On one of those.
No, I hear you. We've got them here as well, and obviously people with disabilities will face different challenges, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be addressed effectively either. But buses and taxis will be banned. The entire carriageway is converted into an open space, places to sit and socialise, as well as trees and plants. So I used to work on Regent Street 100 years ago, but nowhere where you'd have your lunch. It's such a simple thing to sit and eat your sandwiches in the open air. Right? You're not going to do that if you've got you're sort of mainlining exhaust fumes or running the risk of getting hit as cars are increasingly electrified. There is no downside to this. But as a radio phone-in host of some repute, I'm fascinated by the way in which it can be instantly partridgeized, by the way you can absolutely... But that's probably a little bit too meta for the 11 minutes remaining.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:50 and it is, I would say long overdue and a mark really of how I think that's why it's a radio phone-in trope. So much so that Alan Partridge famously took the mickey out of it during... I think he was actually engaged in sexual relations at the moment in that clip, wasn't he? Isn't that why it's so funny? Because he's actually... It's like pillow talk. What do you feel about the pedestrianisation of Norwich City Centre? I'm dead against it. Do you know, I'm such an anorak. I think I know what the next line is. Play the clip again.
Jill, what do you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich City Centre? I'll be honest, I'm dead against it.
People don't realise that traders need access to Dixon's. Is it? Is that it? Good Lord, I love that show. It's so funny. But it is actually... The reason why it is the sort of lazy phone-in heaven is because it's about change. And the best lazy phone-in topics are the ones where things are changing for very good reasons, but I can persuade you, change is bad. Phone me now and tell me how cross you are about change. I think, I could be wrong, but you know me, I like to dig a little deep. Katie's in, Norwich. Katie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I couldn't resist ringing in. I've only lived here since 2015.
Right.
So I've come to Norwich and witnessed being in a city with a pedestrianised access. And for London, I think it's good in theory.
Yes.
But what I've witnessed is that the logistics of it need to be thought about. As a pedestrian, what I've seen is that having no traffic does not mean no traffic. Because there are certain times of the day where you have to have access for delivery drivers, going to Dixon's, of course.
But that's fine. I mean, that will be. I don't think that will apply to Oxford Street. I think almost all of their access points will be around the back, actually. But they might. But you do it before 8 o'clock in the morning, don't you?
Well, yes, in theory. But what I've witnessed is that actually people seem to bend the rules quite a lot. Well, at least in Norwich, anyway.
I'm not going to worry. It's bloody Norwich, isn't it? When was... Do you know that? I actually know this because I lived in Norwich for a while, actually. Do you know Elm Hill?
Yes.
I lived there. Can you believe it?
Oh, very nice.
Isn't it? Very fancy. It was only rented, but I used to open my front door. There'd be Japanese tourists taking photographs on the front step because the house we lived in was so beautiful. I happen to know when London Street was pedestrianised, the first street in the whole of the United Kingdom, or certainly in England, to be pedestrianised. Do you know what year that was?
I don't know.
1967.
Wow.
So that's been pedestrianised for ages. And then you had the second round of it, sort of more recently. But you're describing sort of niggles. You're not describing a major objection to the idea of making a shopping centre cater to the needs of shoppers.
Absolutely, because the other thing about it is that you've got like delivery drivers who whiz round because obviously they've got deadlines to meet. You've got cyclists who whiz round who may knock you over. I think, like say, in theory, it works, but I think logistically, you have to make sure that it's accessible for everybody and that pedestrians are safe in that space, that people don't bend the rules to fit their own needs.
Yes, well, I will hold the Mayor's feet to the fire on that one. I will endeavour to ensure that everybody's needs are met. Do you know that it got turned down in 2018 by Westminster Council, which was Tory at the time? I think it's turned to Labour now. We've obviously got a Labour government. But think about what it's like. If you've walked up Oxford Street at all, or any major shopping street in this country at the moment, you've got the closure of the big department stores, the proliferation of these weird stores selling like American candy, which rarely seems to have anybody in them, which sort of poses all sorts of questions about what the big story might be there. Improving the environment for everybody is, for me at least, is an absolute no-brainer. Liam says, I presume there's a blue plaque outside that house in Norwich. Well, you say that, Liam, and the short answer is no. You've got to have been dead for 20 years before they can put a blue plaque up for you. It may be even longer, but you remind me of a story that's around today that is very, very serious and speaks to that story that's been unfolding in France of an organisation that's putting up blue plaques around London, I think, to start with, commemorating actually murders, crimes against women, to remind us that domestic abuse sentences are routinely considerably shorter than sentences for the same crime committed outside the home. So I should probably have brought that to your attention a little sooner. It's coming up to 12:55, back to the shallow end and the determination of the current mayor of London to pedestrianise Oxford Street. Jane's in Northampton. Jane, what do you think?
Hello. Well, it's very topical, James. I was down in Oxford Street on Saturday, walking along to go down to Hyde Park to do swim serpentine with some friends.
Yes. Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yes. Incredibly, incredibly busy. Lots of people.
It's horrible.
Sorry?
It's horrible.
What?
Oxford Street, not the serpentine.
Oh. I just think it would be a fabulous idea to pedestrianise it, because I think it would just give people a lot more space, a lot more room. You often see people trying to dash across the road in front of buses and taxis and cyclists and what have you. So I think it would just turn it into a much nicer space. And in terms of people being able to sort of get around, obviously you can walk up down Oxford Street, but there's also the tube. So if people wanted to get from sort of one end to the other, you know, there's the central line that bobs right along from one end to Marble Arch right along to the other end. So it's still very accessible for people to get along. And I'm with you. I think deliveries would be around the back. So I think it's a fabulous idea. I think it would just be so much more accessible and a much more pleasant part of London, and get rid of some fumes and just make the space much more inviting.
And there's the Elizabeth line now as well, so you can actually come in at high speed from entirely new parts of town as well, new parts of the country as well, coming in. Well, I can't think of a single downside to this, and I don't mean that as a kind of invitation to downsides, but with assurances that everything is done to ensure the niggles and the loopholes that our last caller referred to. It's just nice. It's a mark of a changing universe. 12:56 is the time. I quite like this from Jamie. Did you go to Sale of the Century when you were shopping in Norwich? Mate, I did a chat show on Anglia Television, a late night celebrity chat show where you had to have a link with the region in order to get on as a guest, and I'm telling you now, some of those links were so tenuous you couldn't see them. I can't remember. Caprice ended up on the show somehow. Do you remember Caprice, the model, the American model? What on earth link could she have had with the Anglia region, which was sort of Norwich, Ipswich and Bury St Edmunds? Maybe she was in pantomime or something like that. But the show was called... So, I don't know if you remember a Sale of the Century, but the Anglia Television... what's it called? Like a physical thing, not a motto. Like the emblem of Anglia Television was a big silver knight on a horse. Take a seat, Sheila. You'll like this. The emblem of Anglia Television was a big silver knight on a horse, right? And my show was called A Night with O'Brien, with a K. It was hilarious. It was like a pun on this thing that everyone associated with Anglia. We're going back 20 odd years now, and that's how the show opened, with this big silver thing. You remember it? And so it would be on the Sale of the Century. And now, live from Norwich, it's the show of the week. It's the Sale of the Century. And that's what we were...
Nicholas Parsons.
We were paying homage to the glory days of Anglia Television in my on my chat show. And I turned up for the first rehearsal, and as I came through the door, I saw two uniformed security guards who I'd never seen in the studio before. And I thought, wow, this is the big time. And I said to the producer, this is the big time. I've got my own security. I've seriously got proper security before I go into the studio. And the producer looked at me and said, no, the security guard is for the night because it's worth about £500,000. So the big lump of metal that they used in the opening credits had its own security detail.
You didn't.
And I was left to face the public without any safety nets in place.
Important lesson in humility, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I learnt it. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen on Catch Up on Global Player, where you'll also find all of LBC shows to catch up on. That's why we call it Catch Up, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. So download Global Player for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4. But now on LBC, it's Sheila Fogarty.
It's the show of the week.
It's the show of the week.
James O'Brien on LBC.